Immortal Cultivation family. My comprehension ability can be stored dest video experiment para intretenimiento y no infringe derechos de autor en iles. Los derechos de la novela y la imaginación del autor original. No reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta respirar y queers escuchar este fanfic completo ahora. Suscrebet en nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 1 Island Monk. Wang Xinghei. The surging waves hit the shore rocks of an island, startling the seabads fishing on the reefs to flap their wings. This is an island shaped like a pair of goods leaning against each other. There are two freshwater lakes, one large and one small, on the island, so it is also called Xuanhu Island. In addition to the two freshwater lakes, Xuanhu Island also has vast plains and jungles, as well as a towering and continuous mountain range, the Chitin Mountains. The third level of key refining finally broke through. In a cave in the Chitin Mountains, a young monk wearing a green robe, a Taoist bun on his head, a face like a crown, and eyes like stars opened his eyes and said excitedly. In front of the young monk, or 3-inch long spiritual eye was emitting spiritual energy. Seeing this, Chen Daoxuan didn't care about being excited, and hurriedly used a stone plate engraved with array patterns to carefully seal the spiritual eye that was emitting spiritual energy. Seeing that the spiritual eye no longer emitted spiritual energy, Chen Daoxuan breathed a sigh of relief. This spiritual eye is the last spiritual eye of the Chen family, supporting the cultivation of the only two cultivators in the Chen family. Once the spiritual eye is exhausted, Chen Daoxuan and his 13th uncle Chen Zian can only refine the free spiritual energy in the air. At that time, their cultivation will inevitably be hindered, and it will be difficult to make any progress. After packing up, Chen Daoxuan stood up and walked out of the cave. Just after leaving the cave, a graceful maid ran over with sweat dripping and called softly, "Sir, the clan leader invites you to come over." After saying that, the maid looked at Chen Daoxuan, and a look of awe appeared on her pretty face. "I know, you go down first." "Yes." After the maid left, Chen Daoxuan used the wind control technique and flew towards another mountain in the Red Copper Mountains. Chen Daoxuan is 16 years old this year. He has been in this strange world for 16 years. Chen Daoxuan was a mechanical engineer in China on Earth in his previous life. Because of a production accident, he died and was reborn in this world. Because of the memory of his previous life, when Chen Daoxuan learned that this world was the world of immortal cultivation in the novels and movies of his previous life, he was really excited for a long time. However, this passion was quickly wiped out under the whip of reality. In Chen Daoxuan's view, the cruelty of the immortal cultivation world is far greater than the civilized society of his previous life. This cruelty is not only reflected in fighting and killing, but also in the absolute monopoly of cultivation resources by major forces. In this world, the sects and the immortal cultivation families almost control all the cultivation resources. Small families and casual cultivators can only get a little bit of leftovers that the sects and the immortal cultivation families don't care about. For example, the Chen family of Xuanhu Island, where Chen Daoxuan is located, is a typical small immortal cultivation family. During the heyday of the Chen family, there were 13 cultivators in the key refining stage. Although there is no spiritual vein, there are also 7 spiritual eyes for cultivators to practice. Not to mention that the Chen family also occupies a miniature first-level spiritual mine, Red Copper Mine. As his thoughts turned, a mountain with green pines soon appeared in front of Chen Daoxuan. This is the cave of Chen Zian, another cultivator of the Chen family of Xuanhu Island. As one of the only 2 remaining cultivators of the Chen family of Xuanhu Island, Chen Zian's cultivation is much higher than Chen Daoxuan, and he is already a cultivator of the 6th level of key refining. Uncle 13. Chen Daoxuan called out respectfully outside the cave. "Come in." A slightly old voice came from inside the cave. Chen Daoxuan responded and walked into the cave, only to see an old man wearing a grey-white robe, a Taoist bun on his head, and a white-haired and childlike face sitting on the jade bed, looking at him steadily. This old man is Chen Daoxuan's uncle, the current patriarch of the Chen family of Xuanhu Island, Chen Zian. "Uncle 13, are you looking for me?" Who knew that? When the old man saw Chen Daoxuan, his eyes flashed with surprise, and then he quickly stood up from the jade bed, walked to Chen Daoxuan in 3 or 2 steps, and said excitedly, "Daoxuan, your cultivation just broke through the 3rd level of key refining." Chen Daoxuan nodded. Talking about the breakthrough in cultivation, Chen Daoxuan's face was also full of joy. "Good, good, good." Chen Zion said 3 good words in a row, and then said, "I didn't expect that you started practicing at the age of 6, and in just 10 years, you broke through the acquired stage and the innate stage one after another, and reached the 3rd level of key refining. It's really God's blessing to my Chen family." At this point, Chen Zion's face became a little gloomy. "It's a pity that my Chen family has declined. If my brothers were still alive, they would buy you a Tang Mei pill no matter what, so that you wouldn't waste 5 years in the mortal realm. In this world, whether it is a mortal without spiritual roots or a cultivator with spiritual roots, they must go through the cultivation of the mortal realm. That is, the acquired and innate realms mentioned by Chen Zian. For mortals, the innate 9th level in the mortal realm is the end of their lives. Without spiritual roots, mortals will never be able to refine spiritual energy and enter the immortal path. For cultivators, the greatest significance of the mortal realm is simply to warm up the body and connect the meridians throughout the body so as to lay a good foundation for refining spiritual energy in the next key refining stage. Chen Daoxuan started practicing at the age of 6 and did not break through to the 1st level of key refining until he was 11. After that, he practiced for 5 years before being promoted to the 3rd level of key refining, and it took an average of 2.5 years to advance to 1 level of cultivation. To be honest, this speed of practice is nothing in the sects and the great immortals, but it is rare for a small family like the Chen family of Xuanhu Island. After all, compared with the great immortals, the practice resources of the Chen family of Xuanhu Island can be said to be extremely scarce, and even compared with the casual cultivators, it is not much better. In the cave, seeing that his uncle Chen Zion looked guilty, Chen Daoxuan hurriedly comforted him. "Uncle 13, why do you say that? If you hadn't rescued him during the monster riot in Changping County 10 years ago, Daoxuan would have died long ago, and would not be here today." Hearing what Chen Daoxuan said, Chen Zion seemed to recall the warm time when he rescued Chen Daoxuan and took him to his side to teach him, and a smile appeared on his face. Seeing that his uncle's complexion had improved, Chen Daoxuan hurriedly changed the subject and said with a smile, "Uncle 13, you asked me to come here because of the red copper mine, right?" "Yes." Seeing that Chen Daoxuan was talking about business, Chen Zion's expression also became serious. Although the red copper mine is a micro vein, our Chen family can gain a foothold in Xuanhu Island thanks to this spiritual mine. Unfortunately, after 300 years of mining, the output of the red copper mine has been declining year by year, from the peak annual output of more than 100 kilograms of red copper, or to less than 5 kilograms per year now. I estimate that this spiritual mine should be exhausted. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but feel heavy-hearted. The Chen family of Xuanhu Island had no spiritual veins, and the only cultivation resource they could use was this spiritual mine. Unfortunately, no matter how carefully they mined, the red copper mine was only a micro-spiritual mine after all. The fact that it could be mined for 300 years was already the result of the repeated conservation of the Chen family of Xuanhu Island. Seeing that Chen Daoxuan didn't say anything, Chen Zion continued, "Since the red copper vein is about to run out, it is better to mine it with all our strength instead of mining it carefully and economically." "Uncle 13, this..." Chen Daoxuan was shocked when he heard this. After all, the red copper mine is the lifeline of the Chen family in Xuanhu Island. Violent mining means that the Chen family has to give up this lifeline, which is undoubtedly a waste of money for a family of immortal cultivators. But the smart Chen Daoxuan knew that the biggest reason why his uncle did this was to provide him with resources to learn refining. Looking at the firm eyes of his uncle Chen Zian, Chen Daoxuan's mouth moved, and the words of refusal came to his lips, but turned into, "Nephew will follow the orders of Uncle 13. The two discussed the details of mining the red copper mine for a while, and Chen Daoxuan bowed and left. It was not until they reached the entrance of the cave that Chen Daoxuan's voice came from behind Chen Daoxuan. Daoxuan, now that you have been promoted to the 3rd level of key refining, the family's spiritual eye may not be enough to support the cultivation of both of us. From now on, let it be used by you alone. This sentence was like a bolt from the blue in Chen Daoxuan's heart, which made him stop in his tracks. Chen Daoxuan turned around, looked at the old man with white hair sitting on the jade bed with red eyes, knelt down respectfully, and kowtowed to him. Go, go. Chen Daoxuan waved his sleeves, with a relieved smile on his face. Chapter 2 Upright. Walking out of the cave, Chen Daoxuan was in a heavy mood. In order to support his cultivation, Uncle 13 even gave up his own path. This kind of grace of enlightenment is really shocking. Chen Daoxuan was reborn in this world. All he heard was that the cultivators used all kinds of insidious tricks, plunder and killing for their own cultivation. He had never heard of anyone giving up his own path for the cultivation of the younger generation. This kind of self-sacrifice behavior is extremely rare, not to mention in this world, even on the earth in the previous life. But thinking of Chen Daoxuan's earnest teachings to him over the years, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but feel relieved. Using the wind control technique, Chen Daoxuan shuttled through the clouds and mist in the mountains, like a fairy. There was no conversation along the way. About half an incense stick of time, a brown mountain appeared in front of Chen Daoxuan. Compared with the caves of Chen Daoxuan and Chen Daoxuan, this mountain was bare, like a hairless vulture, and was extremely ugly. This is a miniature spiritual mine occupied by the Chen family of Xuanhu Island, the Red Copper Mine. The Red Copper Mountain range is also named after this spiritual mine. Near the mine, Chen Daoxuan could see some mortals in linen shirts entering and exiting the mine. They were all members of the Chen clan from Changping County. On the Red Copper Mine, Chen Liangaiyu, who was in charge of the mine, saw Chen Daoxuan flying in the air. Before Chen Daoxuan landed, Chen Liangaiyu hurried forward and bowed, saying, "Welcome, Master Immortal. In this world, cultivators are the absolute ruling class. Therefore, even though Chen Daoxuan was only 16 years old, Chen Liangaiyu did not dare to look down on him because of his age. You and I are both members of the Chen clan, so there is no need to be polite." Chen Daoxuan landed in front of Chen Liangaiyu and raised his hand gently. At a glance, Chen Daoxuan could see that Chen Liangaiyu's cultivation had improved, breaking through from the 6th level of innate to the 7th level of innate. Although Chen Daoxuan only made a routine inspection of the Red Copper Mine once a year, he still had some impression of Chen Liangaiyu, the person in charge of the mine. However, whether it is a 6th or 7th level of the innate realm, in the eyes of the cultivators, there is not much difference. The innate stage and the key refining stage are not at the same level at all. After a pause, Chen Daoxuan smiled and said, "I'm here to check the output of the red copper ore this year." Hearing this, Chen Liangaiyu's vicissitudes of life, which was full of smiles, suddenly collapsed. He said carefully, "Master, the output of the red copper ore this year has decreased again, only a little more than 3.3 kilograms. Sure enough, hearing this, Chen Daoxuan frowned slightly. The situation is worse than Chen Daoxuan expected. This red copper mine may have been exhausted. Even if it is mined with all its strength, it is afraid that not much stock can be squeezed out." Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan took a deep breath and said, "Let's go. Take me to see it. Master, please come this way." Chen Liangaiyu bowed and made a gesture of invitation, and Chen Daoxuan walked towards the attic where the ore was stored. In the red copper mine, except for the 3 mine caves on the mine, the miners and managers usually live in temporary simple wooden houses. Among these simple wooden houses, there is a 3-story attic that stands out. It is a storage room built for temporary storage of red copper ore. Chen Liangaiyu usually lives in this attic, nominally to ensure the safety of red copper ore. In fact, he doesn't want to squeeze in the smelly simple shed with those miners. Of course, the conditions in the red copper mine are so difficult, but the Chen clan members are still willing to come here to serve, not relying on the oppression of the immortal masters, but the generous rewards offered by the family. The family stipulates that anyone who is willing to take the initiative to come to the red copper mine to mine only needs to serve for 3 months to exempt the family from 1 year's taxes. And working in the red copper mine can get a salary of 1 or 2 silver coins every month. Such a generous reward makes the job of miners in the red copper mine a hot commodity in the eyes of the Chen clan members of Shuanghu Island, a high-paying job. If we must make an analogy between this position and a previous life, it would probably be a state-owned enterprise. When they arrived at the attic where the red copper ore was stored, Chen Liangai quickly took out the key to open the bronze lock on the door, and then let Chen Daoxuan into the attic. Turning left and right, in about half a cup of tea, Chen Liangai handed an exquisite wooden box to Chen Daoxuan. After finishing, he bowed and said, "Master Immortal, all the red copper ore mined since last year is in this box." "Yes." Chen Daoxuan nodded without comment and waved his hand lightly, and his true energy surged. Click. The wooden box opened in response, and 4 pieces of red ore, 3 large and 1 small, were seen lying quietly in the wooden box. Unlike ordinary copper ore, there is an inexplicable aura flowing on this red ore. Not to mention cultivators, even mortals can see the strangeness of these ores. Spiritual charm. This is also the biggest difference between spiritual ore and ordinary ore. Generally speaking, the grade of spiritual ore is divided by the amount of spiritual charm it contains. After checking and finding no problem, Chen Daoxuan patted the storage bag on his waist and put 4 pieces of red copper ore into the storage bag. Seeing this, Chen Liangai breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing his expression, Chen Daoxuan smiled slightly and then described the 13th uncle's instructions in detail to the person in charge of the red copper mine in front of him. What? The clan leader wants to fully exploit the red copper vein? Chen Liangai was very surprised to hear the clan leader's order. But with Chen Daoxuan's identity, it is absolutely impossible for him to fake the clan leader's order, which means that the clan leader really intends to give up the red copper mine. Yes, the income of the red copper mine is getting worse year by year. Obviously, the vein has been exhausted. Instead of mining like this, it is better to increase the mining intensity, dig the entire vein upside down, and completely mine all the mineral deposits. Thinking of this, Chen Liangai raised his head and said, "Master Immortal, if we want to completely mine the red copper mine, we may not be able to rely on our limited manpower, and the mining expenses will also increase greatly." Chen Daoxuan didn't care about the expenses mentioned by Chen Liangai. It was just a few silver teals. Silver teals still have value in the eyes of ordinary people, but for cultivators, it is not much different from scrap iron. "Don't worry, I will ask the county magistrate of Changping County to cooperate with you on this matter and inform you in advance, just to let you be mentally prepared." Hearing this, Chen Liangai hurriedly bowed his head and agreed. Although he agreed, Chen Liangai was still in a very bad mood. Fully mining the red copper mine not only means that the family has given up this spiritual mine, but also means that his position as the person in charge of the red copper mine is over. You know, all along, Chen Liangai has been relying on his identity as the person in charge of the red copper mine, and his status in the family is almost comparable to that of the county magistrate of Changping County. It can be said that on weekdays, apart from the high-ranking immortal masters in the family, Chen Liangai is the next in status. As the person in charge of the red copper mine, Chen Liangai controls the mining and personnel of the mine. In addition, he can see the immortal master of the family almost every year, and can have close contact with the immortal master. Who would want to give up such a good job? But giving up the red copper mine was the order of the clan leader, and how could he, a mere 7th level innate clan member, object? Chapter 3 Ambition of Industrial Refining. Generally speaking, except for the miners and the 2 remaining monks of the red copper mine, almost no one lives in the red copper mountains. Most of the Chen clan members live in a county called Changping County. Changping County is located in a plain area not far from the foot of the red copper mountains. The county is backed by the red copper mountains and faces the 2 freshwater lakes of Shuanghu Island, Sun and Moon Lake. On the right is the deep water port of Shuanghu Island. However, the Huangxing Sea is different from the oceans on Earth. In addition to fish resources, there are often monsters in the sea, so few mortals dare to fish in the sea. Over time, this deep water port has been basically abandoned, except for the clan leader Chen Zion, who occasionally drives a boat to lead the clan members to go out to purchase supplies. This deep water port is generally rarely used. The population of Changping County is about 3,000 people, and all the people living here are members of the Chen clan. It is not that the Chen family has only reproduced so few people in 300 years. It is because the cultivation resources on the island are scarce, and the number of cultivators in the clan has not increased. Now, there are only Chen Zion and Chen Daoxuan in the Huangxing Sea. If there are not enough cultivators to protect, a large number of people will only become blood food for monsters. The monster disaster in Changping County 10 years ago is a living example. Although the monsters that wreaked havoc in Changping County were only some of the lowest level monsters that were not ranked. But for mortals, even these lowest level monsters are existences that they cannot contend with. And relying on Chen Zion alone, it is inevitable that he will not be able to protect Changping County. This is also the fundamental reason why the population of the Chen clan has not been able to develop. Without enough cultivators to protect, the population cannot be expanded. Without population, the number of family cultivators cannot be expanded. The two complement each other. The county government of Changping County, County Magistrate Chen Zisheng led a group of officials including the county magistrate and the chief clerk to send Chen Daoxuan outside the county government. Looking at the group of Changping County officials in front of him, Chen Daoxuan instructed, for the mining of red copper ore, you county government must fully cooperate with the person in charge of the red copper mine, and must not neglect your duties. I will obey the order of the immortal master. The sun was scorching in the sky. County Magistrate Chen Zhi, wearing a brocade official uniform, nodded and responded without caring about the sweat on his forehead. Seeing the attitude of the Changping County Magistrate, Chen Daoxuan was slightly relieved, so he didn't waste any more words, and immediately used the wind control technique to fly away. Watching Chen Daoxuan fly away, the officials of Changping County showed unspeakable envy in their eyes. After dealing with the mining of red copper ore, Chen Daoxuan's tense nerves gradually relaxed. Now there are only 2 cultivators in the family, the 13th uncle and him, plus the 13th uncle. Chen Zion is old. The pressure he needs to bear is far beyond the imagination of cultivators from other immortal families. Unless he is willing to abandon the family and become a casual cultivator. But thinking of Uncle 13's meticulous care for him for so many years, and even for him, Uncle 13 would rather give up the Tao to fulfill his selflessness. Chen Daoxuan could not abandon his family no matter what. Soon, Chen Daoxuan's figure fell on a hill not far from his cave. This hill is the second important place of the family besides the red copper mine, the underground fire room. When the ancestor of the Chen family established the Chen family foundation on Shuanghu Island, in addition to discovering the red copper mine, he also found that the island was connected to the underground fire vein. You know, for a cultivation force, the importance of underground fire veins is not less than a mere macro-spiritual mine. It's just that it's not easy to use the underground fire veins. You have to build a building called the underground fire room. Unfortunately, the ancestor of the Chen family was just a casual cultivator at the time, and had no ability to build the underground fire room. It was not until the rise of the Zion generation cultivators in the family that the family cultivators once reached 13 people. Only then did they obtain the inheritance of building the underground fire room by virtue of their military exploits. In other words, the building in front of Chen Daoxuan has only been built for 100 years at most. Of course, Chen Daoxuan did not know the exact year, because there was no record in the clan. Taking a deep breath, Chen Daoxuan pushed open the heavy bronze door of the earth fire room. With a creaking sound that made people's teeth ache, the bronze door slowly opened, and as the door opened, a wave of heat rushed in. This feeling was very similar to the scene next to the smelting furnace of the steel plant in the previous life. This is where Chen Daoxuan has spent the most time in the past 5 years. When the family built this earth fire room, the biggest wish was to train a weapon refiner for the family. However, most of the immortal generation monks spent their entire lives until they died, and their souls were destroyed, and they could not see this scene. Of course, the sacrifice of the immortal generation was not meaningless. It was because of their struggle on the battlefield that they exchanged for a building like the earth fire room and the inheritance of a second-level weapon refiner. Without their sacrifice, the Chen family of Shuanghu Island would never have trained a weapon refiner. There are a total of 3 buildings in the Chen family's earth fire room. The main building is the one that Chen Daoxuan pushed the door into. It is the place where the fire veins gather. The 2 slightly shorter buildings next to it were built by Chen Daoxuan's clansmen. The plaques read drawing room and laboratory respectively. After routinely checking the formation in the underground fire room, Chen Daoxuan walked out of the underground fire room and pushed the door into the laboratory next to it. Compared with the scorching heat of the underground fire room, the temperature in the laboratory is much cooler. However, compared with the clean and tidy underground fire room, the interior of the laboratory looks messy. Various materials are piled up everywhere, most of which are spiritual ores used by Chen Daoxuan when refining tools. In addition, in the most conspicuous position of the laboratory, a cylindrical object with a diameter of about 10 feet stands there quietly, which looks a bit out of place with the ancient laboratory. If there are steel factory workers on Earth here, they will find that the object in front of them is 70% similar to a modern steel making furnace. But compared with the steel making furnace on Earth, this cylindrical object is full of array patterns, which adds a bit of mysterious atmosphere. Chen Daoxuan walked into the laboratory and stared at the huge monster in front of him, his eyes full of complicated expressions. After 5 years of failure, he had to admit that he thought things were too simple. The moment he first came into contact with the inheritance of refining 5 years ago, Chen Daoxuan, who was a mechanical engineer in his previous life, couldn't help but open his mind. Can the output of refining be increased by modern industrial production methods? According to the second level refining inheritance, refining is generally divided into 3 stages, namely refining, shaping, and melting array. As far as Chen Daoxuan knows, the longest stage of refining a first level magic weapon is precisely the refining stage. Take the first level flying sword, the red shadow flying sword, in the second level refining inheritance as an example. The main material for refining the red shadow flying sword is the spiritual mine red copper, or that the Chen family has a large amount of. And if you want to refine the red shadow flying sword, it will take 3 days and 3 nights, just to refine the red copper ore. On the contrary, the subsequent shaping and melting of the array does not take too long, and generally only takes about an hour to complete. This means that, even if the weapon refiner wants to refine the most basic first grade low grade flying sword, he has to work non-stop in the underground fire room for 3 days and 3 nights. This greatly affects the production efficiency. This purely manual production method, in the eyes of Chen Daoxuan, a mechanical engineer, is simply chronic suicide. Chapter 4 Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra. Over the years, in order to develop the furnace he envisioned, Chen Daoxuan invested most of the resources that should have been used to learn refining, but unfortunately, the result was not what he wanted. Chen Daoxuan, who has wisdom, knows that scientific research may never pay off, but as long as it succeeds, the rewards are also amazing. Fortunately, with the help of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra, I learned refining much faster than outsiders can imagine. Chen Daoxuan murmured. The Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra he mentioned was found in his Sea of Consciousness when he broke through to the key refining stage and opened up his Sea of Consciousness 5 years ago. At that time, it was quietly wandering in the center of Chen Daoxuan's Sea of Consciousness. Mysterious, peaceful, and emitting a faint golden light. Chen Daoxuan had never seen the words on this scripture, but he understood its meaning and could recite it silently. Translated, the name of this scripture is called Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra. This scripture is not long, and it takes Chen Daoxuan just 1 stick of incense to recite it completely. When he first started to recite this scripture, he didn't notice anything unusual. It was just that after reciting it, he felt his consciousness was full, his mind was clearer, and he felt refreshed. But after learning about refining for a while, when he started to refine red copper, or for the first time, Chen Daoxuan discovered the horror of this scripture. Normally, even a first level refiner would feel mentally exhausted, and his consciousness was sluggish after refining spiritual, or for 3 days and 3 nights at high load. What's more, Chen Daoxuan was just a rookie at the first level of key refining at that time, and his situation was even worse. He remembered that, when he finished refining red copper, or in the ground, fire room for the first time, he simply collapsed to the ground, and his entire sea of consciousness seemed to be crushed by someone. Then, he recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently. At this time, something unexpected happened. Not only did the originally muddy sea of consciousness return to normal, but even his consciousness was faintly enhanced. After this incident, Chen Daoxuan knew that the value of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra alone was immeasurable, just because it could restore the spiritual consciousness of the cultivator. Although spiritual medicines that restore consciousness are not uncommon in the world of immortal cultivation, each one is expensive and is not something that a small family like the Chen family of Xuanhu Island can hope for. This is also the reason why he dared not show it easily, even though he made rapid progress in refining instruments with the help of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra. Of course, in addition to concealing the existence of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra, he also needed to use the refining resources supported by his family to develop the furnace in front of him. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan's eyes became firm again. No matter what, these 5 years are not without any gains. Maybe tomorrow will be the moment of my success. Chen Daoxuan secretly encouraged himself. According to his idea, the furnace in front of him should be able to replace the process of cultivators refining spiritual ore, just like steel making furnaces on Earth. However, there is a big difference between refining spiritual ore and refining ordinary ore. That is spiritual charm. For ordinary iron ore, refining it only requires high temperature smelting. But spiritual ore is different. While smelting it at high temperature, the spiritual charm on the smelted spiritual ore must also be integrated. This touches on Chen Daoxuan's knowledge blind spot. He could still refine the ore at high temperature, but according to the records in the weapon refining heritage, the fusion of spiritual charm can only be achieved by relying on the power of the cultivator's spiritual consciousness to slowly fuse it. In addition, there is no other method mentioned in the family's second level weapon refining heritage. Perhaps there is no other method in this world, because Chen Daoxuan found that according to the thinking of the immortal cultivators, no matter what happens, they first think of relying on their own strength to solve the problem, rather than relying on external objects. This is fundamentally different from the Earth civilization. Whether it is alchemy, weapon refining, talisman making, or even fighting, the immortal cultivators are more inclined to rely on their own strength. Even if having a powerful magic weapon can gain a great advantage in battle, the cultivators are still more keen to improve their own cultivation. This is also the reason why alchemists are often more popular than weapon refiners. Let's get back to the point. In addition to learning traditional weapon refining knowledge, Chen Daoxuan has devoted all his thoughts to the furnace in front of him in the past 5 years. It is not entirely correct to say that it failed. According to the function of the furnace in front of him, Chen Daoxuan divided it into 5 parts. They are the control system, the feed port, the heating and smelting system, the floating system and the discharge port. The core is the control system. Speaking of the control system, this is what Chen Daoxuan is most proud of, because the core driving array in this control system is the original creation of Chen Daoxuan, based on the array knowledge in the second level refining inheritance and his own ideas. In addition, he uses the sliding rod to control the distance between the spirit stone and the driving array, which can control the amount of spiritual energy received by the driving array, thereby controlling the temperature in the furnace. In other words, through this furnace, only a few mortals need to cooperate to melt the red copper ore. The only problem that cannot be solved now is how to fuse the spiritual charm on the spiritual ore together. This problem has troubled Chen Daoxuan for almost a year. Because the driving array is a gem in front of him, he is more inclined to create a new array to fuse the spiritual charm on the spiritual ore, but unfortunately he has not succeeded. Chen Daoxuan stood in front of the furnace with a stack of drawings in his hand. Observe carefully, the drawings on this stack of drawings are all 3 views and detailed drawings of the furnace in front of him. There was only one blank area, which was the bottom of the furnace. Because according to Chen Daoxuan's idea, there should be a formation that could fuse the spiritual charm of the spiritual ore here. Alas. After a long time, Chen Daoxuan sighed. This feeling of being just one step away from success was too uncomfortable. After thinking for a long time, Chen Daoxuan slowly stopped thinking until his head ached. He put down the blueprint in his hand. Chen Daoxuan simply sat down on the spot, closed his eyes and silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra. For him, silently reciting the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra and practicing the return to origin gong every day were almost unshakable behaviors. Even compared to the practice of return to origin gong, Chen Daoxuan silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra more times. Because every time he refined the weapon, he would be exhausted, and his consciousness would be sluggish. At this time, as long as he silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra once, he would become lively again, and he naturally enjoyed it. As he silently recited the scriptures, Chen Daoxuan fell into a state of chaos. At this moment, he was unaware of the flow of air and the passage of time, as if he had completely lost consciousness. Soon, an incense stick of time passed. After opening his eyes, Chen Daoxuan's face gradually became serious. This was the 9th time. He had never experienced this phenomenon before, when he silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra. However, in the last few times, new changes had obviously taken place in him. I don't know if this change is good or bad. Chen Daoxuan looked at the 9 stardusts in his sea of consciousness, which were rotating around the golden scripture like stars surrounding the moon, and murmured, "What on earth are these stardusts?" Chapter 5 Our family is poor. With a heavy heart, Chen Daoxuan walked out of the laboratory. This time, he did not even practice refining weapons as usual, and hurried away. He was lazy for the first time in 5 years. When Chen Daoxuan came to his uncle's cave again, it was already dark. He looked up at the moonlit sky. This was his 16th year in this world. Because he had a mature soul in his body, Chen Daoxuan always felt a little out of tune with this world when he was alone. Daoxuan. Just when he was in a trance, an old voice pulled him back. When he came to his senses, Chen Daoxuan found that his uncle, Chen Zian, was standing in front of him, looking at him with concern. Uncle 13. Chen Daoxuan bowed quickly. Chen Zian stepped forward, patted him on the shoulder gently, and said meaningfully, "My child, you have suffered a lot." Chen Daoxuan was silent. After a while, he took out 4 pieces of red copper ore, 1 large and 1 small, from his storage bag. Uncle 13, this is the ore taken from the red copper mine today. As you expected, the output of red copper has decreased again. Although he had expected it, Chen Zian still felt a little uncomfortable when he heard the news. In the past 300 years, the red copper vein of the Chen family has always supported the practice of the family's cultivators. Now it is about to be completely lost. Not to mention the loss of interests, as the only old man of the Chen family in Shuanghu Island, it is a little difficult to accept emotionally. Chen Zian can still remember the carefree and unrestrained time when he talked and laughed with the 12 brothers. Now, as time passes, everything is like a passing cloud. The brothers died on the battlefield, and he, the youngest brother, had to take on the responsibility of the family. Chen Daoxuan didn't have much affection for the red copper mine. In his eyes, the red copper mine was just a spiritual mine vein, nothing more. Chen Zian glanced at the red copper, or handed over by Chen Daoxuan, shook his head and said, "You should keep these red copper, or for learning to refine weapons." "Yes, Uncle 13. Chen Daoxuan bowed and responded. "By the way, how is your progress in learning to refine weapons now?" Talking about Chen Daoxuan's learning to refine weapons, Chen Zian couldn't help but reveal a nervous look on his face. Hearing Chen Zian asking about his level of refinement, Chen Daoxuan said seriously, "The family's refinement heritage records a total of 13 methods of refining magic weapons, including 12 first-level magic weapons, and 1 second-level magic weapon. At present, I have only mastered the refining methods of 6 first-level low-grade magic weapons. As for the refining of the other 4 first-level medium-grade magic weapons and 2 first-level high-grade magic weapons, my nephew has not yet mastered it." Hearing Chen Daoxuan's answer, Chen Zian's eyes were full of relief. "In just 5 years, I have mastered all the refining techniques of the first-level low-grade magic weapons in the family's refinement heritage. It's already quite good." Chen Zian knew that, although the family had a refinement heritage, no one taught it. Chen Daoxuan learned to refine weapons entirely by himself, and Chen Zian had a deep understanding of the difficulty. because all the cultivators of their generation had learned the family's second level refinement inheritance by themselves, but none of them could get in. The way of refining weapons is difficult. In addition to consuming a lot of resources, it also requires someone to teach you, so that you can go more smoothly on this road. This is also the reason why there are almost no alchemists and refiners among the casual cultivators. Just one refinement inheritance has blocked everyone out, not to mention the various resources consumed by learning to refine weapons. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's satisfied look, Chen Daoxuan felt embarrassed, because he just lied. In fact, he not only mastered the refining of 6 first-level low-grade magic weapons, but also the refining method of the second-level magic weapons of the 13 magic weapons in the family's refining inheritance. In addition, Chen Daoxuan has mastered all the first-level magic weapon refining in the refining inheritance. To be precise, Chen Daoxuan is now a first-level upper-grade refiner. It's not his fault that he hides his incompetence, but the news is too shocking. His cultivation is only at the 3rd level of key refining, but his refining level has reached a level that many senior 1st level refiners at the 9th level of key refining cannot reach, and he relies entirely on self-study. This is no longer a genius, but a monster. Of course. Due to his cultivation, although Chen Daoxuan has mastered the method of refining a 1st level top grade magic weapon, the success rate of successfully refining it is still too low. The reason is that a 1st level top grade magic weapon requires more 1st level spiritual ores to be refined, and takes longer to refine. With Chen Daoxuan's level of true key and divine consciousness, it is difficult to support it to the end. As for the subsequent shaping and fusion array, it is not difficult for him. He has been studying refining for 5 years, and he can only successfully refine a 1st level top grade magic weapon once in a while. With his cultivation, refining a 1st level low grade magic weapon is no pressure. Refining a 1st level medium grade magic weapon is a bit reluctant, and refining a 1st level top grade magic weapon depends entirely on luck. It's not that his refining level is not enough, but that his cultivation is not enough, and his true key and divine consciousness are insufficient. This is why Chen Daoxuan is so eager to develop a spiritual ore furnace. With the help of this furnace, he can save the consumption of true key and spiritual consciousness in the stage of refining materials, allowing him to deal with the shaping and melting of magic tools more easily. At that time, let alone a 1st level high quality magic tool, even a 2nd level magic tool, Chen Daoxuan can give it a try. Chen Daoxuan's embarrassed look flashed across his face, and he quickly adjusted his mentality and said sincerely, "Nephew, dare not take credit. If it weren't for the strong support of the family over the years, my weapon refining level would not have improved so fast." Chen Daoxuan did not say this nonsense. In the past 5 years, the various spiritual ore materials invested by the Chen family of Xuanhu Island for him to learn weapon refining, if converted into spiritual stones, would be at least 5,000 spiritual stones. Such a huge fortune, not to mention casual cultivators, even ordinary immortal cultivation families cannot come up with it. In addition to the accumulation of 300 years, the Chen family of Xuanhu Island can come up with this amount of spiritual stones, more of which is due to the wealth accumulated by the immortal cultivators on the battlefield. Even so, Chen Daoxuan's learning of refining equipment still brought heavy pressure to the family, so that the patriarch Chen Daoxuan had to consider giving up the red copper mine and cultivating Chen Daoxuan with all his strength. Hearing Chen Daoxuan's words, Chen Daoxuan smiled and nodded, not taking credit, and not being arrogant. Very good. As he said, Chen Daoxuan changed the subject. Daoxuan, you also know that our family is poor, so you must cherish the opportunity given by the family to learn refining equipment. My nephew will remember it. Then, Chen Daoxuan reported to Chen Daoxuan about the full-scale mining of red copper mines, and then left on the wind. Watching Chen Daoxuan leave, Chen Daoxuan paced back to his cave. As the current patriarch of the Chen family, although the spiritual eyes in Chen Daoxuan's cave were exhausted, in terms of area and style, it was far superior to Chen Daoxuan's cave. Of course, the reason why Chen Daoxuan did not build Chen Daoxuan's cave magnificently was to prevent Chen Daoxuan from indulging in luxury at a young age. This painstaking effort is destined to be unable to be told to outsiders. After several rounds of turnover, Chen Daoxuan walked to a wall made of dragon breaking stone. He stretched out his hand, and as his true energy was stimulated, the array patterns on the wall suddenly lit up. Then, the wall made of dragon breaking stone slowly moved away, and what came into view was actually a secret room. As Chen Daoxuan stepped into the secret room, the spiritual light inside was shining, and the densely packed spiritual stones were actually all the size of a baby's fist. Chapter 6, Epiphany? Chen Daoxuan, who had returned to his cave, naturally didn't know. The 13th uncle who had just said that the family was poor was actually counting the wealth in the secret room full of spiritual stones. In the cave, Chen Daoxuan opened the stone plate that sealed the spiritual eye, and suddenly, the spiritual energy came out again. Seeing this, he didn't dare to waste it at all, and quickly ran the return to origin gong to take the spiritual energy into his body for refining. In the Wangxinghe Immortal Cultivation world, according to the efficiency of the cultivators in refining spiritual energy, the spiritual roots of the cultivators are generally divided into 4 levels, namely, low spiritual roots, middle spiritual roots, upper spiritual roots, and the 1 in a million heavenly spiritual roots. Normally, the cultivators with low spiritual roots can only refine 1 point out of every 10 spiritual energy they absorb into their bodies, and the efficiency is very low. Therefore, under the same resource conditions, the cultivation speed of the cultivators with low spiritual roots is the slowest. The efficiency of the cultivators with middle spiritual roots in refining spiritual energy is much higher, generally twice that of the cultivators with low spiritual roots, and they can refine 2 points out of 10 spiritual energy. The speed of refining spiritual energy for a cultivator with superior spiritual roots has to double again, and they can refine 4 out of 10 spiritual energy. The most terrifying is the cultivator with heavenly spiritual roots, who can completely refine the spiritual energy absorbed into their bodies. With the same resources, their cultivation speed is 10 times that of a cultivator with inferior spiritual roots. As for Chen Daoxuan, he didn't know what level of spiritual roots he had. Because the Chen family in Shuanghu Island didn't have magic weapon to detect spiritual roots, the family cultivators could only vaguely judge their spiritual root level, based on the speed at which they refined spiritual energy. In addition, there was no accurate reference standard, so whether this judgment was right or wrong was a matter of opinion. According to the clan leader Chen Daoxuan, the spiritual roots he had were inferior spiritual roots. Because of this, the clan leader started practicing at the age of 10, and it has been 80 years since then, and he has barely reached the 6th level of key refining. It is true that Chen Daoxuan's slow practice was due to the lack of family practice resources, but the main reason was that his own practice qualifications were indeed too poor. Chen Daoxuan's practice speed was much faster. In just 5 years, he broke through to the 3rd level of key refining. At this rate, he would be able to catch up with Chen Daoxuan's cultivation level of the 6th level of key refining in a dozen years at most. Compared to Chen Daoxuan's 80 years of cultivation, to reach the 6th level of key refining, his cultivation speed was more than 4 times faster. In other words, if Chen Daoxuan's spiritual root level is a lower spiritual root, then Chen Daoxuan is at least a higher spiritual root. Except for the 1 in a million selected cultivators with heavenly spiritual roots, Chen Daoxuan's spiritual root level is already the top level. This is because he was born in a small family like the Chen family on Shuanghu Island. If he were a cultivator of a large family, a family member with the qualifications of Chen Daoxuan would have been given the best treatment and training. Not to mention that he also has a terrifying talent for refining. The next morning, after practicing for a night, Chen Daoxuan refined the last breath of spiritual energy, felt the gradually solidified true energy in his danshan, and couldn't help showing a satisfied look on his face. He had just broken through the 3rd level of key refining, and after only 1 night of practice, he had solidified the empty true energy. He was very satisfied with this progress. At this rate, in 3 years at most, he will be able to break through the 4th level of key refining, and become a cultivator in the middle stage of key refining. You know, breaking through the 4th level of key refining can increase the strength of a cultivator much more than breaking through the 3rd level of key refining. According to the records of the Return to Origin Gong, when a cultivator breaks through from the early stage of key refining to the middle stage of key refining, his true key can be at least 50% stronger far exceeding the 20% increase when breaking through the third level of key refining. After finishing his practice, Chen Daoxuan used the stone plate to seal the spiritual eye in the cave again, so that the spiritual energy would no longer overflow. After doing all this, he couldn't help but fall into deep thought. As usual, he would silently recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra every morning after finishing his practice. But now his consciousness sank, looking at the 9 stardusts in his sea of consciousness that were rotating around the golden scriptures. He fell into deep thought. To be honest, he was a little unsure whether he should continue to silently recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra. The 9 stardusts in the sea of consciousness appeared after he silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra for 9 consecutive days. Today is the 10th day. If he continues to silently recite the scriptures, he doesn't know what kind of changes will happen. But the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra is Chen Daoxuan's biggest trump card, and it is obviously impossible for him to give up. Forget it, it's a blessing, not a curse. If it is a curse, it can't be avoided. Since I can't let go of this opportunity, I must be prepared to be backfired by this opportunity. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan's eyes became firm again. Next, close your eyes and recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently. Soon, a Taoist rhyme flowed in Chen Daoxuan's sea of consciousness, and then he fell into a chaos and lost consciousness. Only his mouth was still instinctively reciting the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra. The time of an incense stick passed in a blink of an eye. When Chen Daoxuan opened his eyes again, he found that there was another stardust in his sea of consciousness. The 10th one. Chen Daoxuan pondered, but he frowned. This time it seems a little different. Chen Daoxuan found that the 10 stardusts rotating around the golden scripture in the sea of consciousness seemed to be attracting each other this time. If Chen Daoxuan hadn't deliberately controlled it, these 10 stardusts would have gathered into one. Want to merge into one? Chen Daoxuan murmured, and then his eyes were firm. Then I will grant you your wish. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan no longer controlled the stardust and let them collide with each other. Boom. When the 10 stardusts collided with each other, Chen Daoxuan's consciousness was blank at first, and then he felt his consciousness rising continuously, and finally, his consciousness seemed to be in the scene of the Big Bang. This is deep in the sea of consciousness. The countless knowledge he had learned before came to him like a tide. Among these knowledge, there was knowledge learned in the previous life, but the impression was already vague, and there was also knowledge that he had studied hard in this life and left a deep impression. For example, the main practice method Gyuan Gong that he would practice every day. Chen Daoxuan's consciousness gently touched the Gyuan Gong method. In an instant, a lot of insights about Gyuan Gong came to his mind. It turns out that this is how the Gyuan Gong should be practiced. No wonder I always felt something was wrong when I practiced it before. It turns out that practicing in this way can absorb spiritual energy to a greater extent. In just a moment, he discovered a problem that he had never realized before. It turns out that it can be practiced this way. What is going on? Why do I feel that I have become so much smarter all of a sudden? This feeling is like the legendary enlightenment. That's right, enlightenment. He remembered a practice phenomenon recorded in the ancient family books. Enlightenment. It's just that this kind of opportunity for enlightenment almost only exists in legends. Most cultivators will not encounter enlightenment once in their entire lives. But what is going on now? 10 stardusts collided with each other, and he had an enlightenment. Chen Daoxuan, who had figured it all out, couldn't help but be stunned by this amazing opportunity. Chapter 7. The Birth of the Soul Melting Furnace. That's right. The spiritual ore furnace. Chen Daoxuan immediately remembered the most troubling problem at the moment, which was the spiritual melting formation on the spiritual ore furnace. Because he had previously created a new formation, the driving formation, Chen Daoxuan felt that he had a high talent in the formation. So, he wanted to continue to create new formations to solve the problem of spiritual rhyme fusion in the process of refining spiritual ore. But after thinking hard for a year, he still didn't have much clue. In the sea of consciousness space, Chen Daoxuan looked at the densely packed light balls floating in front of him. Each of these light balls represented the knowledge he had learned, some of which were profound and some were simple. In the sea of consciousness, the size and brightness of the light balls were different. For example, the light ball representing the return to origin gong technique that he just clicked on recorded all his insights and processes of practicing the return to origin gong for 5 years. Therefore, this light ball is also the brightest and largest one among all the light balls. In addition, the second largest light ball is the knowledge of refining. Chen Daoxuan quickly clicked it. Sure enough, the refining techniques and insights of the 12 first level magic tools were all recorded in this light ball. In addition to these, there was also an unfinished incomplete magic tool, which was the spiritual ore furnace, that Chen Daoxuan had painstakingly researched for 5 years. So that's it, Chen Daoxuan's consciousness fluctuated violently, and waves of joy and satisfaction surged into his heart. I was thinking in the wrong direction before. The fusion of spiritual consciousness and spiritual charm is a violent means of suppression, forcing the spiritual charms of many spiritual ores to merge into one. It is unrealistic to achieve this kind of strong pressure through the formation. After all, the formation has no spiritual intelligence, and can only exert its power through the control of the controller. At this time, mortals without spiritual consciousness cannot master the strength of suppressing the spiritual charm. If the suppression force is too strong, the spiritual charm will collapse. If the suppression force is too weak, the spiritual charm cannot be merged. Therefore, the key to the fusion formation is guidance, not suppression. That's right. This is the key to the fusion formation. If you follow this idea, the fusion formation should be arranged like this. With the blessing of the unity of 10 stardusts, Chen Daoxuan's comprehension directly increased tenfold. He could not figure out the formation in a year. At this moment, in less than an incense stick of time, he actually created a complete fusion formation. Soon, an incense stick of time passed. Chen Daoxuan only felt that his eyes went black, and his consciousness withdrew from the depths of the sea of consciousness. It's over. Opening his eyes, Chen Daoxuan realized that this epiphany was over. It's a pity if the epiphany lasted a little longer. Chen Daoxuan muttered to himself. Then, he thought of the soul melting formation again, and he didn't care about anything else. The solar furnace can be said to be the thing that took him the most effort since he came to this world. Chen Daoxuan worked hard to learn the knowledge of refining instruments, just to be able to combine the knowledge of the two worlds and create a magic weapon that even mortals can use. Only in this way can a large number of mortals play their true role. Instead of being reduced to a reproductive tool that provides seeds for cultivation like the tribesmen in Changping County. Now, this magic weapon is finally coming out. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan could no longer hold back his eager heart. He immediately used the wind control technique and flew directly from the cave to the top of the hill of the earth fire room. In a hurry, Chen Daoxuan's speed of controlling the wind was 2 or 3 points faster than usual. In less than half a cup of tea, the 3 buildings of the underground fire room came into view. Chen Daoxuan lowered his body and pushed open the door of the laboratory. Seeing the huge silver white metal furnace placed in the center of the laboratory, he fell into deep thought. According to the method of refining the spiritual ore furnace that he had just realized, the furnace in front of him was obviously a failure. In fact, according to the description of the magic weapon and the family's refining heritage, the failure of this furnace can also be judged, because it is impossible to see the array pattern on the surface of a successful magic weapon. All the array patterns will be melted into the magic weapon itself in the final melting stage. However, the surface of the furnace in front of him is covered with array patterns. Well, let's refine it again. Sighing, Chen Daoxuan knew that it was impossible to add arrays to this furnace. The refining of magic weapons requires a smooth process. It is impossible to refine halfway and then continue refining. The reason for this is still because of the spiritual charm. In the fusion formation stage, the weapon refiner needs to use the formation to perfectly fuse the spiritual charm with the refined and shaped magic weapon embryo, so as to exert the power of the magic weapon. For any magic weapon, the dissipation of the spiritual charm means that the magic weapon is damaged. Even if the main material of this magic weapon looks intact, it can still be used as a magic weapon in the hands of mortals. But for cultivators, a magic weapon without spiritual charm is just a sharp immortal weapon. Thoughts surged in his mind, but the movements of his hands were not slow at all. The laboratory he built was filled with various spiritual ores and ordinary iron ores used for refining. That's right, iron ore. This furnace is so huge, it is naturally impossible that it is all made of spiritual ores. In fact, the main material of the furnace in front of him is just ordinary iron ore. It's just that Chen Daoxuan added a spiritual ore called silver moonstone in it. Therefore, the cost of this furnace is not exaggerated. At most it is equivalent to a first-grade magic weapon. In fact, it is normal to think about it carefully. Otherwise, how much spiritual ore would be needed to make such a huge furnace? Even if the entire red copper mine of the Chen family was filled in, it would still be questionable whether it could be used, which would also lose the original purpose of refining it. Fortunately, there is still stock of silver moonstone. Chen Daoxuan searched through boxes and cabinets, and finally found the spiritual ore he was looking for in a corner of the laboratory. As for ordinary iron ore, there is no need to worry about it. There is a large iron ore vein on Xuanhu Island, and there is as much iron ore as you want. When Chen Daoxuan prepared all the refining materials, it was already noon. Touching the storage bag on his waist, Chen Daoxuan pushed open the door of the underground fire room. As the bronze door of the underground fire room opened, the heat wave hit him again. Chen Daoxuan exhaled a breath of turbid air and walked towards the heat gathering formation in the center of the underground fire room with firm steps. Although there was no flame, Chen Daoxuan could feel a huge amount of heat gathering above the heat gathering formation, waiting to melt the materials put in it. Chen Daoxuan took out the iron ore and silver moon ore from the storage bag and piled them into two mines beside him, one large and one small. For the furnace artifact, refining materials is not difficult. The main reason is that iron ore is too easy to refine. It can be melted into molten iron almost immediately when placed above the heat gathering array. Compared with the difficult to refine spiritual ore, ordinary ore is like a docile sheep. There was no difficulty in refining and shaping these two steps. In front of Chen Daoxuan, a behemoth weighing tens of tons was lifted by his true ki and floated in the air. Next, it's the most difficult melting array. Taking a deep breath and calming the boiling Danshan true ki, Chen Daoxuan worked hard to engrave the array patterns on the furnace in front of him. The first layer of driving array pattern, the second layer of heat gathering array pattern, the third layer of floating array pattern, and the most important fourth layer of array pattern, the melting array pattern. Success. As the last array pattern was engraved, the furnace in front of him emitted a golden light. Then, the golden light slowly converged, and all the array patterns merged into the body of the furnace bit by bit. Seeing this scene, Chen Daoxuan jumped up happily, very excited. This feeling of excitement was no less than when he first got the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra. Si estas escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas. Significa que descargaran y sabiran sinas fuso invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas y encontrarás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos géneros. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 8 Experimental Success. Looking at the silver-white behemoth in front of him, Chen Daoxuan felt an indescribable satisfaction in his heart. It doesn't seem appropriate to call it the spirit or furnace anymore. From now on, I'll call it the spirit furnace. Chen Daoxuan looked at the furnace in front of him and gave it a new name. The magic weapon that he had been developing for 5 years finally had a destination. The first thing Chen Daoxuan had to do was to try out whether this spirit furnace worked well. He wanted to see if the spirit furnace was like what he imagined, without consuming true energy and spiritual consciousness, and only manually controlling the two operating levers on the control system to control this magic weapon. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan became even more impatient. He hurriedly took out 2 pieces of red copper ore from his storage bag and threw them into the feed port of the spirit furnace. This time, Chen Daoxuan did not use a trace of true energy and operated it completely manually. He gently moved the second operating lever on the control table of the spirit furnace. As Chen Daoxuan controlled the operating lever, the driving array slowly ran under the control of the spirit stone, driving the floating array on the spirit furnace to play a role. After the two pieces of red copper ore entered the wrangling furnace from the feed port, they were controlled by the floating array and hovered in the center of the furnace. The first step is completed. Seeing that the wrangling furnace was running as he had imagined, Chen Daoxuan was very encouraged. Next, it is to heat and smelt the spiritual ore. He continued to operate the first operating lever, controlling the distance between the spiritual stone and the driving array, to control the input of spiritual energy, thereby controlling the operation of the heat gathering array. Chen Daoxuan slowly pushed the operating lever, and under the action of the heat gathering array, the temperature inside the wrangling furnace rose sharply. Soon, it reached the temperature that Chen Daoxuan could reach when the heat gathering array was usually used for refining. Is that it? Watching the wrangling furnace running quietly, Chen Daoxuan felt unprecedented relief. This feeling was like watching the production of automated machines in his previous life. Of course, Chen Daoxuan knew in his heart that the real test had not yet arrived. The most difficult problem to solve in the wrangling furnace was to fuse the spiritual rhyme. Although the wrangling array on the wrangling furnace was his sudden enlightenment, he did not dare to guarantee whether it would work. As time passed, even the red copper ore could not withstand the continuous high temperature smelting in the wrangling furnace. 4 hours later, the two pieces of red copper ore finally melted. Seeing this scene, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but cheer up. He knew that the most critical moment had come. Under the observation of his divine sense, Chen Daoxuan found that in the wrangling furnace, the two red liquid masses slowly merged into one under the effect of the floating formation. Not only that, the spiritual charm on the two liquid masses was also slowly merging. This was not him using his divine sense to suppress the spiritual charm. In fact, his divine sense did not touch the spiritual charm on the red copper ore except for observing in the furnace, let alone suppressing the fusion of the two. Obviously, this was the wrangling formation at work. Woo woo woo. At the moment, when the spiritual charm merged, a burst of white light came out from the top of the wrangling furnace, accompanied by a burst of rapid roar. This sound was somewhat like the sound of high pressure water vapor in the previous life. This is a small design made by Chen Daoxuan, based on the changes in spiritual pressure caused by the fusion of spiritual rhyme on the spiritual ore. It is equivalent to a feedback system, to remind the miners that the spiritual ore has been refined. Otherwise, mortals do not have spiritual consciousness, so how can they know whether the spiritual ore has been successfully refined? Chen Daoxuan was happier than hearing the fairy music when he heard this short humming sound. He hurriedly operated the joystick, and the refined liquid spiritual ore slowly floated out from the outlet. Good. Chen Daoxuan was very excited. He used his true energy to capture the refined red copper liquid ball in front of him, and carefully checked it with his spiritual consciousness, and found that it was no different from the red copper ore he refined. Great. In this way, as long as there are enough melting furnaces, my refining efficiency can at least increase by dozens of times. Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but say. Take the refining of the red shadow flying sword as an example. It originally took Chen Daoxuan 3 days and 3 nights to refine the materials. Now he only needs to complete the shaping and melting of the magic weapon. However, the shaping and fusion of the first level magic weapon are relatively simple. Even if the fusion is a little difficult, it can be done in an hour at most. In other words, the workload that originally took 3 days and 3 nights has now been compressed to 1 hour, and the work efficiency has increased by 36 times. Chen Daoxuan, a weapon refiner, is equivalent to 36 weapon refiners in the outside world. What's more terrifying is that this efficiency can be replicated. Once this revolutionary magic weapon is popularized in the future, as long as one weapon refiner is born in the family, it will be equivalent to the birth of 36 weapon refiners in the outside world. With this thing, are you still worried about not having spirit stones? Are you still worried about not having cultivation resources? At this moment, Chen Daoxuan felt unprecedented relief. The decline of the family and the withering of the cultivators in the family were like a mountain pressing on his heart, making him dare not relax for a moment. But at this moment, the clouds finally cleared and the sky was blue, and all the pressure was far away from him. However, if you want the soul melting furnace to work, the underground fire chamber connected to the underground fire vein is indispensable, otherwise the heat gathering array will not work. After saying that, he looked at the small underground fire chamber he was in and shook his head. This underground fire chamber is definitely not okay, and the terrain here is not suitable for building a weapon refining workshop. After careful consideration, he still felt that Changping County was in a good location. Changping County is located in a plain area and has a broad space for development. Even if you want to expand the weapon refining workshop in the future, it is just a matter of words. But the premise of all this is that you need money. But Chen Daoxuan knew that the family had no money. Over the years, in order to support him in learning weapon refining, the family has invested at least 5,000 spirit stones. You know, 5,000 spirit stones are a huge fortune even for foundation building cultivators. At least for casual foundation building cultivators, few people can come up with so many spirit stones. But, without relying on the family, who can Chen Daoxuan rely on? Although he has been in this world for 16 years, he has never left Xuanhu Island since he was a child. For so many years, he basically practiced and learned to refine weapons. Uncle 13 rarely let him worry about family affairs. For the Chen family of Xuanhu Island, Chen Daoxuan's ability to become a refiner is the greatest reward to the family. After thinking for a long time, Chen Daoxuan finally decided to use the power of the family. Even if he really couldn't get help, at least he could ask Uncle 13 for help. After all, compared with a rookie in the cultivation world like Chen Daoxuan, Chen Ziyan, who had participated in the cultivator war and mixed in the cultivation world of Wang Xinghe and even Ziyan Yanzhao, was much more experienced than him. Do it as soon as you say it. Chen Daoxuan quickly put down the wrangling furnace and flew towards the cave of the clan leader Chen Ziyan. Chen Ziyan's cave. At this moment, after checking the family's secrets, Chen Ziyan was holding a cup of tea, humming a little song, and lying comfortably in the recliner to bask in the sun. Achoo. Suddenly, Chen Ziyan sneezed violently and sat up from the recliner with a blank look on his face. Chapter 9. Live up to our ancestors and our descendants. Red Copper Mountains. Earth Fire Chamber. Chen Ziyan stared at the huge object in front of him, which was several feet high and 10 feet long, and was stunned. What was even more peculiar was that judging from the faint spiritual light emitted by this huge object, this thing was actually a magic weapon. Seeing this scene, Chen Ziyan turned his head to look at Chen Daoxuan next to him, and couldn't help but say, "You just said that this thing called wrangling furnace can help you refine spiritual law?" Yes. Chen Daoxuan nodded affirmatively. To be precise, wrangling furnace can not only help the refiner to refine spiritual law, but also does not require cultivators to control it. Only a few mortals can control it. Hearing this, Chen Ziyan was immediately upset. It was incredible enough to help the refiner to refine spiritual law. This thing did not need cultivators to control it. This was no longer incredible, but shocking. If it was really as Chen Daoxuan said, then the significance of this magic weapon would be too great. Although Chen Ziyan failed to become a weapon refiner, he had learned the family's weapon refinement inheritance in his early years, and he still knew some basic knowledge of weapon refinement. He knew that in the process of refining some low-level magic tools, refining materials is often the most time-consuming and laborious. If a few mortals and a furnace can solve the problem of refining spiritual ore, then the speed of weapon refiners refining will definitely be greatly accelerated. Such a simple truth, as the patriarch of the Chen family of Xuanhu Island, he naturally saw it at a glance. Seeing the skeptical expression of Uncle 13, Chen Daoxuan did not waste any words and immediately operated it in front of him. 4 hours later, due to the closed nature of the wrangling furnace, it can melt spiritual ore faster than the weapon refiner directly using the heat gathering array. It usually takes 3 days to refine the red copper ore, but now it only takes 4 hours to refine it. Chen Daoxuan said, while operating the second operating lever to move the red liquid mass out of the wrangling furnace. Although Chen Ziyan is not a weapon refiner, he can still feel the rich spiritual charm exuded by the red liquid mass in front of him. He then brought the red liquid mass in front of him, blinked, looked at the red liquid mass, and then looked at the wrangling furnace. His old face became redder and redder, and finally he couldn't help but burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Chen Ziyan's laughter lasted for half a cup of tea before he stopped. As if realizing that he had lost his composure in front of his nephew, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but blush slightly, but soon, this emotion was thrown behind him. Daoxuan, how much does it cost to refine this wrangling furnace? Seeing the serious expression on Chen Daoxuan's face, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but say seriously, report to the clan leader, refining the wrangling furnace requires two materials, iron ore and silver moonstone. Iron ore is not valuable, and the main cost is silver moonstone. He paused. This furnace in front of me consumed a total of 39 kilograms of silver moonstone, which is about 195 spirit stones, if converted into spirit stones. Although silver moonstone and red copper ore are both first grade spiritual ores, their price is much higher than that of red copper ore, reaching 5 spiritual stones per kilogram. This is mainly because the reserves of silver moonstone in the 10,000 star sea are relatively low. Of course, as the Cunning Sword sect has continuously waged wars against the state of Izumo in recent years, and plundered a large amount of resources from the state of Izumo, the price of silver moonstone has also been decreasing. If you really want to count, the most widespread and cheapest spiritual ore in the 10,000 star sea is neither silver moonstone nor red copper ore, but a first grade spiritual ore called black iron. This stuff is not only abundant in the 10,000 star sea, but also rampant in the world of immortal cultivation in Xi'an continent. As a result, many low-level cultivators who neither know how to refine instruments nor can afford magic instruments often use the black iron to roughly refine it and then use it directly as a magic instrument, which is just a joke. 195 spiritual stones. It's cheap, not expensive. Chen Daoxuan stroked his goatee and said with a smile. He knew in his heart that compared with the help to the weapon refiner, these mere 195 spirit stones were simply not worth mentioning. Chen Daoxuan, who was standing aside, heard this and shook his head and said, ahem, clan leader, 195 spirit stones are just the cost of this furnace. You haven't calculated the cost of building the underground fire chamber? Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan was stunned. Why do we need to build an underground fire chamber? Doesn't the family already have this underground fire chamber? Upon hearing that Chen Daoxuan was going to build an underground fire room, Chen Daoxuan suddenly lost his composure. Chen Daoxuan knew very well how expensive the construction cost of the underground fire room was, because this underground fire room was built by him. It cost more than 2,000 spirit stones to build it back then. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's stingy appearance, Chen Daoxuan's mind moved slightly. Looking at the expression of his 13th uncle, it seemed that there were still a lot of stocks in the family. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan said calmly, clan leader, although this underground fire room is good, it is too small, and there were many unreasonable places in the original layout, such as the heat gathering formation here. After having the soul melting furnace, this heat gathering formation is of no use, and here. Chen Daoxuan began to list the shortcomings of the underground fire room in front of him bit by bit, until finally Chen Daoxuan's old face turned pale. Chen Daoxuan stopped embarrassedly. Huh? Chen Daoxuan snorted. Is the underground fire room I built so unbearable? Seeing Uncle 13's unfriendly expression, Chen Daoxuan immediately shook his head like a rattle and said, you can't say that. It's just that with the soul melting furnace, this earth fire room is indeed not very practical. And Uncle 13, think about it carefully. If you want to maximize the efficiency of the weapon refiner in refining magic tools, at least one weapon refiner should be equipped with 4 to 5 soul melting furnaces. Now, our earth fire room can still barely accommodate it, but what if the family produces more weapon refiners in the future? Is this space enough? Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan said unhappily, there are only 2 cultivators in the family now, and you are thinking about producing a lot of weapon refiners. Even the Zhao family doesn't dare to think about it. Seeing Chen Daoxuan grinning there, Chen Daoxuan fell into deep thought. For a long time, he looked at Chen Daoxuan solemnly and said, come with me. Chen Daoxuan and Chen Daoxuan flew towards Chen Daoxuan's cave, one after the other. In less than an incense stick of time, the two landed in front of the cave. Along the way, Chen Daoxuan said nothing. Chen Daoxuan vaguely knew what Chen Daoxuan was going to do, and he couldn't help but look forward to it. Entering the cave, the two turned around and stopped in front of a stone wall made of broken dragon stone. Chen Zion looked at the broken dragon stone, whose surface was as smooth as jade, and said thoughtfully, my Chen family has been based on Shuanghu Island for 273 years since our ancestor Chen Daoxuan. Do you know what our Chen family relies on to continue to this day? Chen Zion turned around and looked at Chen Daoxuan. Chen Daoxuan thought about it, then shook his head. My Chen family can stand for 300 years, relying on the spirit of our ancestors who fought and sacrificed for the younger generations of the family. It relies on the inheritance of the younger generations of the family's hard work and sacrifice. Chen Zion raised his head slightly, ascending the immortal path and blessing future generations. In the past 300 years, my Chen family has done it. At this moment, Chen Zion thought of his elder brother who died generously on the battlefield, his seventh brother who risked his life to protect him, the youngest brother, and his ancestors who sacrificed their lives for the family generation after generation. Infected by Chen Zion's sad mood, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but remain silent. Although he knew that the Chen family was declining, Chen Zion had been doing his best to shelter him from the wind and rain over the years, until his body was hunched and his temples were pale. This kind of kindness, any person would not be indifferent. 13th Uncle, Daoxuan will continue the will of the ancestors in this life, live up to the ancestors, and live up to the descendants. Chen Daoxuan said firmly. Hearing this, Chen Zion stared at him with red eyes, and finally nodded heavily. My Chen family is very lucky to have a descendant like you. Chapter 10 Spiritual Veins. Boom boom boom. As the array pattern on the broken dragon stone was activated, the stone wall was slowly opened. As the family's secret cave was opened, a burst of spiritual light shone. Chen Daoxuan, who was standing outside the secret room, was almost blinded by the spiritual light on these spiritual stones. He looked at the clan leader Chen Zion with a shocked face, and saw a smug smile on his face. That expression seemed to say, you kid are scared. Chen Daoxuan pursed his lips, and tried to put on a calm expression, but his cheeks twitched from time to time, still revealing his excited heart. The family is so damn rich. So many spiritual stones, I'm afraid there are 10,000 of them. He looked at the spiritual stones neatly stacked on the shelves, and couldn't help thinking. In the secret room, in addition to spiritual stones, there are also some precious spiritual ores. In addition to red copper, ore and some common first level spiritual ores, Chen Daoxuan even sensed the spiritual fluctuations of the second level spiritual ores. Gulp. Chen Daoxuan's Adam's apple rolled, and he couldn't help swallowing his saliva. Here is all the savings of my Chen family for 300 years. Shocking, right? Chen Zion's voice with a sigh sounded in Chen Daoxuan's ears. When I took over the position of the patriarch, when I saw these things for the first time, my reaction was similar to yours. Uncle 13, what's going on? Didn't you say that the family is very poor? And since the family has so many spiritual stones, why did you give up cultivation? If you exchange these things for cultivation resources, I believe you will be able to make further progress. Chen Daoxuan seemed to think of something and said anxiously. Obviously, in his heart, he has always been brooding over Chen Zion's giving up cultivation. He thought that Chen Zion gave up cultivation for himself. You are right. Chen Zion nodded. Exchanging these things for cultivation resources can indeed make my cultivation go further. If I'm lucky, it is not impossible for me to enter the 9th level of key refining. But then what? Can I build a foundation? No. Chen Zion sighed. For a member of my family with low qualifications like me, I have to use up the accumulation of my Chen ancestors for 300 years. How unwise. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan could no longer speak. Live up to the ancestors and the descendants. Chen Zion used his own actions to set the best example for him, the descendant of the Chen family. Facing such an uncle, facing such a patriarch of the Chen family, what else could Chen Daoxuan say? Chen Daoxuan said nothing, and bowed respectfully to Chen Zion. Chen Zion accepted Chen Daoxuan's salute calmly. After a while, he waved his hand. There are a total of 8,743 spiritual stones and 635 kilograms of various first level spiritual ores. The most precious ones are 3 pieces of second level spiritual ores. Chen Zion pointed to an exquisite wooden box in the corner of the secret room. With the weight of these 3 pieces of second level spiritual laws, it is barely enough to refine a second level magic weapon, but my Chen family has not been able to produce a weapon refiner, except you for so many years. Now, I hand all these things over to you. After speaking, Chen Zion looked directly into Chen Daoxuan's eyes, and after receiving his affirmative look, he nodded with satisfaction. Patriarch, I have a question. Speak. After arranging his words, Chen Daoxuan continued, since the family has so many spiritual stones, why don't you train more disciples in the family? Hearing this, Chen Zion nodded first, then shook his head. I understand what you mean. Such a huge fortune can indeed train a few more cultivators for the family, allowing the family to regain the prosperity of the immortal generation. But have you ever thought that the lifespan of a cultivator is only 120 years at most before the foundation building period? After this generation of cultivators passes away, how will a Chen family, which has neither red copper veins nor family savings, continue? Seeing that Chen Daoxuan didn't speak, Chen Zion knew that this kid must not agree with the ideas of the older generation. But after thinking about it, Chen Zion was relieved again. Chen Daoxuan is different from them. Chen Daoxuan has good qualifications and a talent for refining. He must be thinking of doing everything he can to develop and expand the family, rather than relying on generations of accumulation to save a spiritual vein for the family. Daoxuan, I know you want to expand your family. Not only you, but every generation of our Chen family thinks so. But you have to remember that, if a family of immortal cultivators wants to expand, in addition to the inheritance of skills, the spiritual vein is the real foundation of a family. Spiritual vein? Chen Daoxuan frowned. Yes, do you know why our Chen family can produce 13 immortal cultivators? Chen Daoxuan shook his head. It is because of the 7 spiritual eyes in the family. At this point, Chen Zion couldn't help but sigh. It may be the favor of the ancestors, or it may be pure luck. The previous patriarch Chen Zion's had discovered 4 spiritual eyes in a row in the Red Copper Mountains. Together with the original 3 spiritual eyes of the family, this gave birth to the grand occasion of 13 cultivators in the Chen family. But, after all, the spiritual eye is just a rootless duckweed. There is no pattern to its appearance, and there is no pattern to its exhaustion. Chen Daoxuan was deeply touched by Uncle 13's words. Because at the beginning of his cultivation, there were 2 spiritual eyes in the family, one for him, and one for Chen Zion. However, when he cultivated to the 2nd level of key refining, the spirit eye of 13th uncle inexplicably dried up. At this point, there was only 1 spirit eye left in the family. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's expression of deep agreement, Chen Zion continued, the spirit vein is different. As long as the family cultivators do not commit suicide, it will not dry up. As long as a family of immortal cultivation controls a spirit vein, it means that the family has the foundation of inheritance. Unfortunately, although the spirit veins of Wang Xinghe are wide, there is not a single ownerless spirit vein. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan thought, so, the family's savings are to artificially give birth to a spirit vein? That's right. Seeing that Chen Daoxuan was stunned, Chen Zion smiled and said, I know, you may think our ancestors are a little stupid. To artificially give birth to a spirit vein, not only does it cost more than 100,000 spirit stones, but also a spirit formation is set up. But if our Chen family wants to truly gain a foothold in Wang Xinghe, there is no other way, except to control a spirit vein. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan was silent. He knew that Chen Zion was right. Only with spiritual veins can one cultivate spiritual fields, plant spiritual medicines, and raise spiritual beasts. Most importantly, only with spiritual veins can the Chen family cultivators have enough spiritual energy to practice. He was not like Chen Daoxuan now, who was trembling with fear every day when practicing, fearing that the spiritual eyes in the cave would dry up. As Uncle 13 said, this feeling was like a rootless duckweed. Chen Daoxuan hated the feeling that his fate was not under his control, and he wanted to change all this. Chapter 11 Family Development Planning. Put the spiritual stone into the storage bag. Chen Daoxuan and Chen Zion walked out of the secret room. In the living room of the cave, the uncle and nephew sat opposite each other. A set of tea sets was placed on the tea table in front of them. Chen Daoxuan was making tea for Chen Daoxuan. The clear tea flowed from the teapot into the teacup, and the fragrance of tea immediately filled the air. Chen Daoxuan smelled the tea fragrance and felt that his consciousness was a little more active. Obviously, this was not an ordinary tea, but a spiritual tea. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's greedy face, Chen Daoxuan smiled and handed the teacup over and said, "Try it. This nourishing tea is one of the few good things your 13th uncle has. Then I will obey your order." Taking the teacup, Chen Daoxuan drank it in one gulp like a cow chewing a peony, and smacked his lips after drinking it. "How is it?" Chen Daoxuan asked, while tasting the tea. "It smells good." Seeing Uncle 13's glare, Chen Daoxuan immediately said, "The consciousness is like soaking in warm water, very comfortable." That's right, the nourishing tea is very beneficial to the spiritual consciousness of the cultivators. Long-term drinking can increase the spiritual consciousness of the cultivators. At this point, Chen Daoxuan laughed self-deprecatingly. Mortals all think that we cultivators are the kind who sleep in the open air and fast on air. How could they have thought that we cultivators are not eating, but poor and can't afford it? He looked at the nourishing tea on the table and continued, "This small pot of nourishing tea is worth 50 spirit stones." Puff. Cough cough cough. Chen Daoxuan had just poured himself a second cup of nourishing tea, and after hearing this horrible price, he choked and coughed. 50 spirit stones? So expensive. Chen Daoxuan stared, with an unbelievable look on his face. Chen Daoxuan said to himself, "Let's not talk about spiritual tea. The monks of big families usually eat spiritual rice. You should know that long-term consumption of spiritual rice can warm the body. In Guanghan Prefecture, even the first level spiritual rice, jade crystal rice, is sold for 5 spiritual stones per 100 kilograms. If it is eaten all year round, how can ordinary monks afford it? Not to mention that there are all kinds of spiritual pills, spiritual fruits, spiritual wines and even other rare treasures that can assist in cultivation, and all of these require spiritual stones." Chen Daoxuan remained silent. He knew that Uncle 13 said so much to tell him that once he had enough spiritual stones, he must first cultivate the spiritual veins. Because as long as there are spiritual veins, all the cultivation resources he mentioned can be obtained slowly by relying on spiritual veins. Uncle 13, Daoxuan understands what you mean. When the refining workshop is built and spiritual stones are earned, I will definitely give birth to the spiritual veins as soon as possible. Chen Daoxuan promised solemnly. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's attitude, Chen Daoxuan said no more. He immediately changed the subject and said, "Daoxuan, what do you think about the future development of the family?" This was the first time that Chen Daoxuan took the initiative to talk to Chen Daoxuan about the family's development plan. In the past, Chen Daoxuan didn't let Chen Daoxuan worry about the family's affairs. He told Chen Daoxuan that his most important task was to learn to refine instruments and strive to become an instrument refiner as soon as possible. Now that Chen Daoxuan is already a first-level instrument refiner, the increasingly aging Chen Daoxuan has to consider the issue of training a successor. Hearing this question, Chen Daoxuan knew that his 13th uncle was testing him. After sorting out his thoughts, Chen Daoxuan said, "Patriarch, I think the most important thing for the family now is to build an instrument refinery workshop, and around the establishment of the instrument refinery workshop, we need to do 3 preparations." "Which 3? First, investigate the market for the sale of magic instruments in Guanghan Prefecture. Second, purchase the ore or materials for building the instrument refinery workshop and refining the magic instruments. Third, rent a shop in Guanghan Prefecture to sell finished magic instruments." Chen Daoxuan talked about his thoughts on how to develop the family over the years. Chen Daoxuan listened to his narration, sometimes clapping his hands in praise, sometimes interrupting and correcting. As the uncle and nephew continued to discuss, the rough development plan of the Chen family in the next few years was gradually finalized by the two. To sum it up, in one sentence, in the next 5 years, the focus of the family's development will be on the weapon refining workshop. And Chen Daoxuan is the core executor of this development plan. Because he is the only one in the Chen family who can refine weapons, and only he can refine the unique wrangling furnace. Unknowingly, the Yangshan tea in the teapot was empty. Chen Daoxuan shook the teapot and found that the tea was completely gone, and he couldn't help but smacked his lips. Embarrassed, he put down the teapot, thinking bitterly in his heart that when the family has money in the future, he must buy Yangshan tea to take a bath. Okay, since this matter has been finalized, I will use the clan leader's order at the clan meeting tomorrow to announce this development plan in public. Chen Zion concluded. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's expression of wanting to say something, but not saying it, Chen Zion retracted his gesture to send him away and asked, "Why, is there anything else?" Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan said seriously, "Patriarch, Daoxuan thinks that, while developing the weapon refining workshop, the training of the family's children must also keep up. We can't always rely on you and me." He knew in his heart that Chen Zion was thinking about saving up 100,000 spirit stones and then giving birth to spirit veins. However, Chen Daoxuan believed that training family children and giving birth to spirit veins did not conflict, but the premise of all this was that the weapon refining workshop could earn a large amount of spirit stones. Otherwise, whether it was training family children or giving birth to spirit veins, it would be a passing cloud and a foolish dream. Hearing Chen Daoxuan's suggestion, Chen Zion hesitated. He thought about it, shook his head and said, "Let's put this matter aside for later discussion. But I can promise you that, as long as the spirit stones earned by the weapon refining workshop reach a certain level, we can simultaneously start the family children training plan and the spirit vein birth plan. But there is one thing, the spirit vein birth plan must be placed before the family children training plan." "Okay." Chen Daoxuan nodded. But what? Chen Zion glared. He found that Chen Daoxuan's usual submissiveness was all pretended. In fact, this kid had more ideas than anyone else. Chen Daoxuan said embarrassedly, "How many spirit stones does this weapon refining workshop have to earn every year to meet the standard?" "Uncle 13, you have to give me a specific number, right? Since you insist on training the children of the family, then I will give you a standard. If the net profit of the weapon refining workshop can reach more than 3,000 spirit stones per year, I will agree to your request." Hearing this guarantee, Chen Daoxuan was overjoyed. He stood up excitedly and said, "It's a deal. Let's high five as an oath. Get out. I'll beat you up." Seeing his disrespectful look, Chen Zion immediately blew his beard and glared at him, pretending to hit him. Seeing this, Chen Daoxuan ran away without saying a word and ran out of the cave in a flash. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's cheerful steps, Chen Zion couldn't help but smile on his pretending to be angry. "Haha, you little brat." Chapter 12 First Level Sword Technique, Wind Chasing Sword Technique. Southwest of Huangxing Sea, the turbulent sea water hit a jet black cargo ship, making a rustling sound. Chen Daoxuan stood on the deck, looking at the boundless sea, turned his head, and looked at the patriarch Chen Zion and said, "Uncle 13, is this the family's Kanglang cargo ship?" "Haha, yes, that's it." Chen Zion stroked the mast of the Kanglang. "Is this your first time on a ship?" Chen Daoxuan nodded. Although Chen Daoxuan has lived 2 lives, it is still the first time for him to sail on the sea. For a while, he felt a little novel. Sailing on the sea is a little novel at first, but you will get bored after watching it for a long time. Our trip to Lingbai Island is a long way. Even at the speed of the Kanglang, it will take at least a month. Chen Zion was right. Chen Daoxuan felt bored after watching it for less than an incense stick of time. In addition to the azure blue sea water, there is still azure blue sea water in sight. Nothing surprising. As if thinking of something, Chen Daoxuan asked, "Uncle 13, didn't you always say that the Huangxing Sea is dangerous and that monsters often appear in the sea? That's when you run around." In fact, on the fixed route, the Huangxing Sea is still very safe. After all, monsters also have intelligence. They know where it is safe and where it is dangerous. Chen Daoxuan was stunned when he heard this. He originally thought that 1 or 2 monsters would appear on this journey, giving him a chance to kill monsters. It seems that he thought too much. Time passed day by day. The days of sailing on the sea were simply boring. After experiencing the initial novelty, Chen Daoxuan simply hid in the cabin to practice all day. However, there was no spiritual eye on the ship, so he could only absorb and refine the free spiritual energy in the air, and the speed of practice was very slow. Finally, Chen Daoxuan, who couldn't stand this turtle speed, simply gave up practicing, and changed to comprehending and learning spells. For cultivators in the key refining stage, the means of defending against enemies are mainly spells, magic tools, and talismans. Needless to say, magic tools and talismans need to be purchased with spirit stones, and are external objects. In addition, there is another way for cultivators to exert their own strength, that is, magic. The grade division of magic is the same as that of magic tools, and can also be divided into first grade, second grade, and third grade. However, unlike magic tools, there is no grade division for magic of each grade. For example, the first grade magic fire control technique mastered by Chen Daoxuan is essentially no different between the fire control technique practiced by the cultivators of the first level of key refining, and the cultivators of the 9th level of key refining. There is no distinction between the first grade low grade fire control technique and the first grade high grade fire control technique. However, the results of the same grade of magic are also different for different people. In the cultivation world, cultivators generally divide the results of magic cultivation into 4 levels: entry, minor success, major success, and perfection. For a cultivator of key refining, it is very simple to get started with a magic. Even those with dull comprehension can practice a first grade magic in a few months. But the subsequent cultivation of magic is not that simple. Chen Daoxuan has practiced for 5 years, and has only mastered 2 spells so far. One is the wind control spell used for traveling, and the other is the fire control spell used for refining weapons. As for spells for fighting and defense, Chen Daoxuan has not learned any. It's not that Chen Daoxuan has a poor talent for spells, but that people have limited energy. Chen Daoxuan has to focus on Gyu and Gong and study the art of refining weapons in the past 5 years. The most important thing is that he has to develop a fusion furnace from scratch. No matter how talented he is, he really doesn't have the energy to practice other combat spells. Of course, this does not mean that Chen Daoxuan has no means to fight against the enemy. Because in addition to spells, to defend against the enemy, the main way for cultivators to defend against the enemy is magic weapons. And as a refiner who has refined a first grade top grade magic weapon, how could Chen Daoxuan lack magic weapons? In his storage bag, there is now a first grade top grade magic weapon. It is the only first grade top grade magic weapon he has refined, a water attributed flying sword called Fixu sword. Ever since he refined the flying snow sword, it has been his trump card, and he has kept it in his storage bag. Even his uncle Chen Zion didn't know that Chen Daoxuan had such a trump card. However, the flying snow sword is powerful, but it also consumes a lot of true energy. Chen Daoxuan tried it. If he used the flying snow sword with all his strength at the 2nd level of key refining, he could only use 3 swords at most, and his true energy would be consumed. Although his cultivation has now been upgraded to the 3rd level of key refining, he can only use 1 more sword at most, and then his true energy will be exhausted, and he will be at the mercy of others. The 10th day of sailing in the sea. Chen Daoxuan, sitting cross-legged in the cabin, closed his eyes. He looked at the 10 stardusts rotating around the golden scripture in his sea of consciousness, and his mood could not help but become extremely excited. Sure enough, as long as you recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra once a day, you will store a stardust in your sea of consciousness. For 10 consecutive days, you will store 10 stardusts in exchange for an opportunity for enlightenment. After these days of attempts, Chen Daoxuan has figured out the rules for storing stardust. First, no matter how many times he silently recites the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra every day, he can only store 1 stardust at most. As for the extra times he recites the sutra, he can only restore the consumed spiritual consciousness as before. Second, he can only store up to 10 stardusts. If Chen Daoxuan insists on not using them, they will continue to revolve around the golden sutra. Third, after the 10 stardusts collide and merge into one, they can greatly improve Chen Daoxuan's understanding and produce an effect similar to enlightenment. He has a feeling that these 10 stardusts are this unknown sutra called Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra, which forcibly stores his daily understanding and waits until the 10th day to use it intensively. When this idea came to his mind, Chen Daoxuan himself was shocked. He has heard of saving money and food, but this is the first time he has heard that understanding can also be stored. But no matter what, this is the fact. Chen Daoxuan can only regard Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra as his biggest secret, and keep it tightly. During these days on the ship, although Chen Daoxuan could not practice the return to origin gong, he did not waste time, but thought of practicing a new spell. If other key refining cultivators heard this, they would probably laugh their teeth off. Although it is not difficult to get started with a first level spell, 1 month is far from enough to practice it to a certain level. In fact, it is quite good for a key refining cultivator to get started with a spell within a month. If you want to practice a spell to a small success within a month, even a cultivator with a natural spiritual root cannot do it. Normally, it takes at least 1 year for a cultivator to practice a first level spell to a small success. And if you want to practice a spell to a great success, it takes at least 5 years. As for the level of perfection, it is no longer a level that can be achieved by spending time. This requires a cultivator to have an extraordinary understanding. Generally speaking, a cultivator completely masters a spell, which means that the cultivator has practiced this spell to the realm of great success. Chapter 13, Sword Skills. Inside the cabin, Chen Daoxuan opened his eyes and played with the jade slip in his hand. Lost in thought, he asked for this jade slip from his 13th uncle 10 days ago. It is said that it is a sword technique inheritance that the family exchanged from Cunning sword sect with military merits, called chasing wind sword technique. The grade of this sword technique is not high, only equivalent to a first level spell. But it is one of the most basic sword techniques of Cunning sword sect, and it is said to be a sword technique that disciples who join the sect must learn. Without caring about the 10 stardust and the sea of consciousness, Chen Daoxuan immediately took out a red flying sword from the storage bag. It was a red shadow flying sword that he had refined the most times. Under the infusion of true energy, the tip of the red shadow flying sword suddenly burst out with a 3-foot long sword light. Under the pressure of the sword light, the air was visibly distorted. This power almost reached the limit of a first level low grade flying sword. Looking at the flying sword he made himself, Chen Daoxuan nodded with satisfaction and said, "The sword light is 3 feet long, not bad." Although the grade of the magic weapon is distinguished by the number of superimposed arrays, after the fusion of the array pattern of the magic weapon is restrained, and outsiders cannot see how many arrays are superimposed on this magic weapon. Judging by the spiritual charm of the magic weapon is not accurate enough. Sometimes, if the magic weapon is only one small level off, it is easy to make a mistake. Only judging by the power of the magic weapon is the most accurate. After all, magic weapons are used for fighting, and combat power is the only criterion for judging the grade of magic weapons. Compared with the refiners who divide the grades of magic weapons by array patterns, ordinary cultivators still agree to divide the grades of magic weapons by the power of magic weapons. Take the flying sword as an example. The sword light of 3 feet is the limit of the power of the first grade low grade flying sword. If it exceeds this limit, it can barely be called a first grade middle grade magic weapon. Chen Daoxuan's Fiksu sword, with the infusion of true energy, even had a sword beam that was slightly longer than 9 feet. If converted into the length unit of the previous life, it would be a 3-meter long sword beam. Once such a powerful flying sword is used, it is truly terrifying. Putting away the jade slip, Chen Daoxuan intends to use the sword controlling technique in the chasing wind sword art to control the red shadow flying sword. The red shadow flying sword flew up and down under his control. In a short while, the cabin was filled with the dense sword energy and sharp sword light. Half an incense stick was used. The red shadow flying sword flew back to Chen Daoxuan's hands like a young swallow returning to its nest. Feeling the hot breath emitted by the red shadow flying sword, Chen Daoxuan smiled. Not bad. I didn't expect that it only took me 10 days to master the chasing wind sword art. The chasing wind sword art was the first offensive spell he practiced. Chen Daoxuan was very satisfied with the good results he achieved. You know, he was able to master this sword art in 10 days entirely by himself, not with the help of the golden finger. This kind of achievement, even among the disciples of the key refining period of the Cunning sword sect, is considered a genius. After performing it for a while, Chen Daoxuan found that the speed of the red shadow flying sword was 3 times faster than usual when using the chasing wind sword art, and the overall power of the flying sword increased by 10%. Don't underestimate this increase in power. You must know that this is only the effect of the entry-level sword art. According to the records of this sword art, if the sword art is practiced to a small success, the power of the flying sword can be increased by 30% out of thin air, and if it is practiced to a great success, it can be increased by 60%. As for the perfect realm, the jade slip is vague. It is estimated that even the creator of it thinks that no one can practice this sword art to the perfect realm in the key refining period. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan took a deep breath. After 10 days of hard practice, the chasing wind sword art has been practiced to the entry level. If it is in the case of enlightenment, what exaggerated effect will it have? Chen Daoxuan's heart is faintly looking forward to it. Do it as soon as you say it. Chen Daoxuan immediately stopped controlling the 10 stardusts in his sea of consciousness and let them collide with each other. As the 10 stardusts merged into one, Chen Daoxuan felt a familiar elevation of consciousness again. Soon, the scene of the Big Bang of the universe appeared in his eyes again. Countless light balls rushed out from the depths of his sea of consciousness with the explosion, and scattered in front of Chen Daoxuan. As soon as he moved his mind, a light ball emitting a dim light floated in front of him. Clicking on the light ball, it was recorded in it that he had learned the wind chasing sword art in the past 10 days. Sure enough, in reality, a smile appeared involuntarily on Chen Daoxuan's face with his eyes closed. As the light ball was opened, countless insights about the wind chasing sword art poured into Chen Daoxuan's mind, making him feel like he had suddenly opened his eyes. So this is what we should do when controlling the flying sword. Wind chasing is what it means. I see. As the insights continued to accumulate, Chen Daoxuan's attainments in the wind chasing sword art were also visibly improved. Soon, the time of an incense stick passed. As the enlightenment receded like a tide, Chen Daoxuan withdrew from this state of enlightenment. When he opened his eyes, a feeling of great loss appeared in his heart. He had a hunch that, as long as this state of enlightenment just now continued, he would be able to practice the wind chasing sword art to a perfect state that almost no key refining cultivator could reach. What a pity. But immediately, Chen Daoxuan adjusted his mentality. Anyway, this kind of enlightenment only happens once every 10 days. Just wait another 10 days. Thinking of this, his lost mood improved again. Now, let me see what the effect of this enlightenment is. Chen Daoxuan couldn't wait to take out the red shadow flying sword from the storage bag again. As the sword light of the red shadow flying sword was stimulated, the flying sword flew through the air like a rainbow. The sound of the flying sword breaking through the air has become smaller. Chen Daoxuan soon discovered the difference in controlling the flying sword this time. One stick of incense ago, when he controlled the flying sword, there would be a clear hissing sound. Chen Daoxuan knew that it was the sound of the air being torn apart. But this time, the hissing sound of the flying sword disappeared. The red shadow flying sword flew in the ship's hold like a nimble fish, except that its flying speed was countless times faster than that of the fish in the sea. This state was clearly the effect of the chasing wind sword art recorded in the jade slip after it reached the minor success stage, and it was not just the minor success stage, but it had gone a long way in the minor success stage. Chen Daoxuan estimated that his current attainment of the chasing wind sword art was probably not far from the major success stage. Too scary. Is this the effect of the tenfold comprehension superposition? Before, when he created the wrangling formation, he did not have a deep understanding of the state of enlightenment. After all, the wrangling formation was first introduced, and he did not know how difficult it was to create this formation. But now he knows. Even for someone like him who thinks he has a good talent for swordsmanship, it would take 2 or 3 years to reach this state in the chasing wind sword art. And now, in just one stick of incense, he saved himself from 2 or 3 years of hard work in practicing the sword art. It's worthy of being called the Hongmeng Enlightenment scripture. Chen Daoxuan was convinced by the name of this scripture for the first time. Boom. Just as he was sighing, a suffocating sense of oppression emerged in Chen Daoxuan's heart. What's going on? Chen Daoxuan immediately rushed out of the cabin with his flying sword, and when he looked up, a dark cloud slowly covered the Kanglang. Chapter 14 Lingsu Battleship. After leaving the cabin, the deck of the Kanglang was already in chaos. The panicked shouts of the tribesmen kept reaching Chen Daoxuan's ears. "Chief, there is a huge ship flying towards us in the sky. Chief." At the bow, Chen Zion said nothing, raised his head, and looked at the huge ship flying towards them overhead, his face solemn. After a moment, he looked at Chen Daoxuan, who ran out of the cabin, and said, "Take good care of the tribesmen, and tell them not to panic. This is the Lingsu warship of the Zhao family of Guanghan Prefecture patrolling the waterway." Lingsu warship. Chen Daoxuan silently repeated it and nodded. After explaining to Chen Daoxuan, Chen Zion used the wind control technique and flew towards the huge ship above his head. Compared with the huge ship in the sky, Chen Zion's figure was so small that it seemed to be floating. Chen Daoxuan didn't have time to look at it, and hurriedly comforted the panicked tribesmen and asked them to lower the sails and slowly stop the Kanglang. The Kanglang was above the sky. Chen Zion's figure continued to rise until it was level with the Lingsu warship. He took a deep breath, clasped his hands, and said in a deep voice, "I'm the head of the Chen family of Shuanghu Island. I'm going to Guanghan Prefecture to buy supplies. This is my channel pass token." After that, Chen Zion took out a black token from the storage bag, injected true energy, and threw it towards the Lingsu warship. The Lingsu warship was white as a hole, and it was unknown what material it was made of. Except for the appearance of the entire warship, the interior was completely shrouded in a fog, and it was not clear, giving people a huge sense of oppression. Chen Zion didn't know which foundation building cultivator of the Zhao family was in charge of this warship, so he had to honestly present the channel pass token according to the rules. About half a cup of tea, a black token flew out from the inside of the warship. As soon as Chen Zion received the token, he heard a voice ringing in his ears. "Dao, remember not to deviate from the safe channel, otherwise we, the Zhao family of Guanghan Prefecture, will not be responsible for any danger. Junior, remember this." Chen Zion hurriedly bowed and responded. Boom. Soon, in front of everyone's eyes, the Lingsu warship quickly took off, roared and disappeared into the sky. Watching the giant ship leave, Chen Zion couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Returning to the deck of the Kanglang, Chen Zion ordered again, "Let the tribesmen raise the sails, and we will continue to move forward." "Yes, tribe leader." Chen Daoxuan nodded, and quickly ordered the tribesmen to set sail. When the Kanglang was sailing normally, Chen Daoxuan, full of doubts, walked to Chen Zion and asked, "Uncle 13, what was that just now?" "It was the Lingsu warship of the Zhao family," Chen Zion said with a smile. "Didn't you ask me before why we didn't encounter any monster attacks along the way?" "That's the reason." Chen Zion pointed to the Lingsu warship that had disappeared in the clouds in the sky. "Do you mean that the Zhao family is protecting the waterway?" "Of course. Otherwise, where do you think the prosperity of Guanghan Prefecture comes from?" Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan immediately understood. The Zhao family is the largest family in the 100,000 mile sea area. It is rumored that the ancestor of the Zhao family has reached the great perfection of the Purple Mansion and is only one step away from the legendary Chinden Zenran. Such a large family of Immortal Cultivation naturally has the strength to protect the waterway of this 10,000 mile sea area from monster attacks. Besides, only when the waterway is safe can trade prosper, and the Zhao family of Guanghan Prefecture can obtain the greatest benefits. The rulers always want peace in the world, and only the ambitious lower classes are afraid that the world will not be in chaos. Of course, no one can provide absolute protection. After all, those monsters that are not ranked have low intelligence, and are no different from wild beasts. They don't know where is safe, and where is dangerous. Not to mention the so-called safe waterway, even the Zhao family's base camp Lingbai Island. These low-level monsters stimulated by the blood of mortals dare to go there. It's just that these monsters can usually only provide a snack for mortal warriors. Chen Daoxuan of the Purple Mansion family couldn't help but whispered, "It's so majestic. It's majestic." Chen Zion sighed. The ancestors of the Zhao family caught up with the good times. They stood in the right position in the war when Kainian Sword Sect occupied Huangxing Sea 1,000 years ago, which laid the foundation for the 1,000-year prosperity of the Zhao family in Guanghan Prefecture. Even in the chaos of the gods, in Huangxing Sea 500 years ago, countless immortal families were cut off, but the Zhao family stubbornly survived, which shows the deep foundation of the Zhao family in Guanghan Prefecture. Speaking of the largest immortal family in the 100,000-mile sea area, the Guanghan Prefecture Zhao family, Chen Daoxuan's tone was full of envy. In fact, it was not just him. Any Immortal Cultivation family in the vast sea area had the same attitude when talking about the Zhao family in Guanghan Prefecture. They were awed and envious, and they didn't even dare to feel jealous. The rebellion of the gods? Chen Daoxuan keenly captured the new knowledge point in Chen Daoxuan's words. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's puzzled expression, Chen Daoxuan explained, that was a casual cultivator 500 years ago. He called himself the true man of the gods. He got a great opportunity from somewhere and caused chaos in the Huangxing Sea for 100 years. In the end, it was the Kainian Sword Sect who strangled him. It was also from then on that the Kainian Sword Sect launched a war against the Chuan Kingdom in Xian'anzhao. This war lasted for a full 400 years. When talking about the war between the Kainian Sword Sect and the Chuan Kingdom, Chen Daoxuan seemed to recall some bad memories, and his voice gradually weakened. Chen Daoxuan saw that he touched on the sad memories of his 13th uncle, so he didn't dare to ask too much. The next 20 days were calm. Neither did they encounter the Lingsu warships of the Zhao family, nor did they encounter monsters. 20 days later, an old voice sounded from outside the cabin, and Chen Daoxuan recognized it. It was the voice of his 13th uncle Chen Daoxuan. Daoxuan, we've arrived at Lingbei Island. Chen Daoxuan was excited when he heard this. After drifting in the sea for a whole month, even though the Kanglan was not an ordinary cargo ship, but a modified cargo ship engraved with a wind-gathering array and a water-avoiding array, its speed far exceeded that of ships on Earth. Chen Daoxuan couldn't stand it anymore. It wasn't that the Kanglan was bumpy or boring to sail, but because of the lack of spiritual energy, he couldn't practice the return to origin gong for a month, and his cultivation didn't improve at all. For a cultivator, the most uncomfortable thing is that his cultivation can't improve at all. Chen Daoxuan now finally understands Chen Daoxuan's feelings. He just can't practice for a month, but Chen Daoxuan has completely given up practicing. The two are completely different concepts. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but admire his 13th uncle even more. Walk out of the cabin. A scene like a sail covering the sky appeared in front of him. What caught his eye was densely packed with white sails. From time to time, there were cultivators flying in the sky with swords, streaking across the sky. Chen Daoxuan knew that those streaks were cultivators above the foundation establishment stage. The key refining stage cultivators were all waiting in their respective boats, queuing up to enter the port. The Chen family had no foundation establishment stage cultivators, so naturally, they also lined up like most key refining stage cultivators. Si esta se escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas. Significa lo descargaran y sabiran sinas fuso ten invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas ali encontrarás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos géneros. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 15 Guanghan Prefecture. 2 hours later, the Kanglan docked in the port. After a month of drifting, Chen Daoxuan finally stepped on the ground. Is this Guanghan Prefecture? Looking at the surging crowds and the crowded pedestrians around him, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but say, yes, this is Guanghan Prefecture. Seeing this most prosperous city within a radius of 100,000 miles, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but feel excited. In Chen Daoxuan's view, the prosperity of Guanghan Prefecture is more like a modern civilized coastal city than the ancient society in his previous life. First of all, this city does not have a wall similar to the ancient times. It is a completely open city. Secondly, there are too many buildings in the city, one after another, residential houses, restaurants, inns, and businesses. There are endless and endless. After getting off the boat, Chen Daoxuan found that at the dock, a group of mortals in strange clothes were carrying sacks and moving goods to the cloud beast cart non-stop. They were wearing shackles and had difficulty walking. Behind every dozen of porters, there was a mortal warrior holding a whip in his hand, as if guarding them. Chen Daoxuan swept his mind and found that the sacks were filled with food. Chen Zian, who was walking in parallel, followed Chen Daoxuan's gaze and explained, "Those are mortal prisoners of war from the Izumo kingdom. They were bought by some independent cultivators and small families and used as slaves." Using mortals as slaves. Chen Daoxuan had always thought that mortals were just reproductive tools for cultivators to provide seeds for cultivation. Unexpectedly, there were cultivators who used mortals as slaves. As if seeing his doubts, Chen Zian smiled and said, "Of course, we cultivators can do without food and drink, but mortals can't." In addition to the large number of cultivators in the cultivation family, the mortal population in their family is extremely large. Take the Zhao family for example. There are tens of millions of mortals in their family. Such a large number of mortals cannot be supported by the food produced by Lingbei Island alone. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan understood instantly. Most of the slaves in Chuan Kingdom were serfs of the Wangxinghe monks. The independent cultivators relied on the serfs to reclaim the barren island and grow food, while the large cultivators exchanged these food with meager spiritual stones to feed the large population of their own clans. Both sides took what they needed. This is also one of the sources of spiritual stones for independent cultivators. As for why the Chen family of Shuanghu Island did not develop this industry, Chen Daoxuan glanced at his elderly uncle 13 and immediately understood the reason. It's not that the Chen family is kind-hearted, but that they have more than enough strength. The number of Chen family cultivators is too small. In addition to dealing with family affairs, Chen Zian also has to protect the safety of the people in Changping County. How can he have the energy to engage in these side jobs? Moreover, most of the mortal prisoners of war in Chuan Kingdom are warriors. Without the suppression of cultivators, it is difficult to ensure that these serfs will not rebel and defect by relying on ordinary Chen clan members. In addition, the income from exchanging ordinary food for spiritual stones is too low, which feels quite useless. The Chen family did not develop this industry. As if thinking of something, Chen Daoxuan continued to ask, "These slaves were originally members of some immortal cultivation families in Chuan country, right?" Hearing this, Chen Zian was silent at first, then nodded. "That's right. The war between our Wangxinghe and Chuan country has been going on for more than 400 years. Fortunately, we have been on the offensive, so most of the victims are mortals from Chuan country. Among these mortals, most men were sold as serfs, and women became tools for the reproduction of the major immortal families." In just a few words, Chen Zian outlined a picture of an extremely cruel world of immortal cultivation for Chen Daoxuan. There has never been anything beautiful here, only more cruel fighting than in the previous life. In order to compete for resources, the cultivators' methods are more cruel than in the previous life. This is the sadness of the weak. No matter in the previous life or this life, there is no difference. Chen Daoxuan thought to himself. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's ugly expression, Chen Zian still did not stop narrating. As the future patriarch of the Chen family in Shuanghu Island, there are some things that he must bear. The reason why we didn't tell him these things before was to let him concentrate on learning to refine weapons. It doesn't mean that Chen Daoxuan can escape. Is being weak a crime? Chen Zian was stunned at first, then nodded and said affirmatively, "Yes, in this world, being weak is a crime." Everyone moved forward. After Chen Zian settled the accompanying clansmen in an inn in Guang'an Prefecture, he took Chen Daoxuan to the inner city of Guang'an Prefecture. As the two of them moved towards the inner city, Chen Daoxuan found that the number of cultivators was increasing. In the end, he could hardly see any mortals. All he could see were cultivators. Although Guang'an Prefecture is a city where immortals and mortals live together, cultivators and mortals don't actually live together. The inner city of Guang'an Prefecture, where we are going now, is the real immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, Chen Zian said as he walked. Sure enough, as the team continued to move forward, a tall city wall appeared in front of the two. At the city gate, A cultivator wearing a green robe with a fiery red spirit bead embroidered on the robe blocked the two's way. "Stop, please pay the city entry tax." Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan took out 2 spirit stones from his storage bag and handed them over. "Go in." The Zhao family cultivator waved his hand and let the two enter the city gate. Chen Daoxuan looked back and saw a long line of people with almost no end in sight. As soon as he stepped into the city gate, Chen Daoxuan seemed to have entered another world, and the concentration of spiritual energy suddenly soared by more than 10 times. "This is..." Seeing Chen Daoxuan's shocked look, Chen Daoxuan beside him explained, "This is the spiritual vein. There is a 3rd level spiritual vein buried under the Guanghan Prefecture Immortal City, so we just stepped into the city and felt the spiritual energy pressing." Looking at the sky, Chen Daoxuan said, "Let's find an inn to stay in first." Every night, Zhao family cultivators will clear out cultivators who do not have the right to live in Guanghan Prefecture Immortal City, to prevent casual cultivators from coming here to steal spiritual energy. House rentals in Guanghan Prefecture Immortal City are divided into short-term rentals and long-term rentals. Short-term rentals are inns, and the rental period is generally less than 1 month. If the lease period is more than 1 month, the cultivators often choose to rent a cave house from the Zhao family because the price is cheaper than a short-term inn. Since Guanghan Mansion has sufficient spiritual energy, the price of the inn here is also very touching. Chen Daoxuan and his partner only opened 2 guest rooms for a 10-day lease and paid a full 20 spiritual stones in rent, which means 1 spiritual stone per person per day on average. This is just the inn with the lowest spiritual energy concentration. It is rumored that Guanghan Xianfu also provides 4 levels of cave houses, A, B, C, and D. The living environment and spiritual energy concentration of each level of cave house are different. I don't know what price of spiritual stones is needed to rent the highest level A-level cave house. Of course, the cultivators who can afford to rent the A-level cave house are either the children of other immortal cultivation families or the casual cultivators with a special skill. Ordinary casual cultivators and children of small families dare not even think about it. Chapter 16. The Market for Casual Cultivators. The next day, Chen Daoxuan, who had finished his training early, started investigating the magic weapon market in Guanghan Prefecture as planned. Guanghan Prefecture Immortal City is mainly divided into 4 areas: the core business district, the casual cultivator market, the cave rental area, and the Zhao family cultivator residence that manages this immortal city. The areas we are mainly investigating today are the core business district and the casual cultivator market. Needless to say, the core business district is the most prosperous street in the entire Guanghan Prefecture Immortal City. Every inch of land here is worth a lot of money, and most of the shops are in the market, but not in price. If you want to buy a shop in this prosperous business district, it is not enough to have only spirit stones, but also someone must be willing to sell it. Most of the shops in the core business district are controlled by the Zhao family and several major foundation building families, and it is difficult for ordinary cultivators to get involved. As for the casual cultivator market, it is a business district dominated by casual cultivators and small families. There are few shops here, and most of them are casual cultivators setting up stalls. As we all know, casual cultivators are generally very poor, their pockets are cleaner than their faces, and their spending power is naturally far less than that of the children of big families. However, although the individual wealth of the scattered cultivators is not as good as that of the children of the big families, there are many scattered cultivators. In terms of quantity, the scattered cultivators in the 100,000 mile sea area are dozens of times more than the children of the family. Therefore, the seemingly chaotic scattered cultivator market has become the second most prosperous place in the entire Guanghan Prefecture Immortal City, second only to the core business district. 13th uncle, why don't you and I split up into 2 groups so that we can speed up the investigation? Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan thought about it and said, okay. After discussing it, Chen Daoxuan chose to investigate the core business district, while Chen Daoxuan went to the scattered cultivator market, that the two of them were more optimistic about. Riding on the cloud-stepping beast car, Chen Daoxuan went to the scattered cultivator market in Guanghan Prefecture Immortal City. As soon as he entered the scattered cultivator market, and before he got off the car, The noisy sound of the outside world like a raging fire came into Chen Daoxuan's ears. After paying the fare and getting off the car, Chen Daoxuan then carefully looked at the largest scattered cultivator concentration in the 10,000-mile sea area. Compared with the streets in the core business district, the streets here are much wider. It is better to say that it is a rectangular square than a street. On both sides of the street, countless casual cultivators spread out a carpet, put some goods on it, and started to sell them one after another. It looks quite similar to the flea market in the previous life. In comparison, the shops on both sides of the street are much quieter. The casual cultivators seem to prefer to exchange items on the stalls rather than go to the shops. Chen Daoxuan thought about it and did not visit the more lively casual cultivator stalls, but walked towards the deserted shops. Tongbao Pavilion. Walking in front of a shop, Chen Daoxuan glanced at the plaque and walked in. It seemed that there had been no customers for a long time. The shopkeeper of Tongbao Pavilion was stunned when he saw a customer coming to the door, and then he smiled and trotted forward. "My fellow Taoist, what do you want to buy? We have all kinds of magic tools, elixirs, magic talismans, and magic rice, as well as various spiritual materials to choose from." Seeing the customer, the shopkeeper of Tongbao Pavilion introduced the store, as if he was afraid that Chen Daoxuan would run away. After listening to the shopkeeper's introduction, Chen Daoxuan had a rough idea in his mind. This store is just a grocery store, basically selling everything, but the specific goods are unknown. "Shopkeeper, you are too polite." Chen Daoxuan bowed and pondered. "I wonder how much the magic tools in your store are." Magic tools. Hearing about magic tools, the shopkeeper's eyes lit up. Big business. Different magic tools have different prices. "I wonder what level of magic tools you want to buy?" "First level magic tools, upper, middle and lower level flying swords. Please take a look at each one," Chen Daoxuan said simply. Hearing this, the shopkeeper nodded and said, "Dao, please follow me upstairs." After that, he made a gesture of invitation. "Go up to the second floor." The shopkeeper asked the waiter to serve tea, and he personally fetched the magic weapon for Chen Daoxuan. It took about half a cup of tea. According to Chen Daoxuan's request, the shopkeeper brought 3 sword boxes, which contained 3 flying swords from the first grade low grade to the first grade high grade. "Dao, please look." The shopkeeper first opened the sword box on the far left, and a green flying sword with a cold light flashing came into view. This is the first grade low grade flying sword, King Feng sword. This sword is extremely sharp. If you inject true energy, the sword light can reach 2 feet. Chen Daoxuan took the flying sword and injected true energy into it. Suddenly, a sword light more than 2 feet long shot out from the tip of the sword. "How is it?" Chen Daoxuan did not comment and looked at the other 2 sword boxes. The shopkeeper did not care and opened the second sword box. Suddenly, a silver light came into view. This is a first-class medium quality flying sword, the Silver Moon Sword. It is made of silver moonstone. This sword can not only generate a 5-foot sword beam, but also has the characteristic of not being afraid of fire. It is indeed the nemesis of fire magic. Seeing that Chen Daoxuan was dissatisfied with the first flying sword, the shopkeeper quickly introduced the second flying sword. However, when Chen Daoxuan saw the second flying sword, he already had a vague idea of the magic weapons sold in this store. He did not wait for the shopkeeper to introduce it, and opened the third sword box himself. Sure enough, Chen Daoxuan's face was full of disappointment, but he was very happy in his heart. "Shopkeeper, why are the magic weapons sold in your store all second-hand goods?" Seeing that Chen Daoxuan had revealed the mystery, the embarrassed look on the shopkeeper's face flashed away. Chen Daoxuan was not talking nonsense. These 3 flying swords were all second-hand flying swords used by others, and they had been used for at least 5 years. The spiritual charm on the flying swords began to dissipate. You know, the service life of a general first-class magic weapon is only about 10 years. A flying sword has been used for 5 years, and has reached half of its service life. Unless the price is extremely low, even casual cultivators are unwilling to buy such a flying sword. "Fellow Daoist, you have good eyesight," the shopkeeper said, seeing that Chen Daoxuan saw the truth, and he no longer concealed it. The flying swords in our store are indeed the flying swords that the children of the big families exchanged for. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan drank a sip of tea and waited for the next words. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's indifferent attitude, the shopkeeper continued, "Fellow Daoist, you should know that my Wangxinghe and Chuan kingdom have been fighting, and the demand for magic tools on the front line has reached the point of being urgent. That is to say, within the Wangxinghe, if it were in the 7 immortal cities on the front line, flying swords of this quality would have been snapped up long ago, even if they were second hand." Hearing this nonsense, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but sneer. Then why doesn't the shopkeeper go to the front line to sell these flying swords? He believed the shopkeeper's words that there was a shortage of magic tools on the front line. After all, magic tools have a service life, and fierce battles will sharply shorten the service life of magic tools. Wangxinghe and Chuan have been fighting for hundreds of years, and it is obvious that there is a shortage of magic weapons on the front line. But to say that the frontline monks are willing to take any second-hand magic weapon is completely a lie. Because the more monks fight on the front line, the higher the quality of the magic weapon. After all, no one wants to lose their lives on the battlefield because of the poor quality of the magic weapon. You know, even if Carnean Sword Sect wants Wangxinghe monks to contribute and participate in the war with Chuan, they can only rely on various skills and cultivation resources to attract them. Who dares to force the monks on the front line to use these inferior second-hand goods? Aren't you afraid that the monks will mutiny in a minute? Seeing that he couldn't deceive Chen Daoxuan, the shopkeeper had no choice but to keep lowering the price of the flying sword until he finally reduced the price of the King Feng sword to 50 spirit stones. But Chen Daoxuan still refused to let go. "Since your store doesn't have the magic weapon I want, I won't bother you anymore." After saying that, Chen Daoxuan wanted to leave. "Don't waste your time, Daoist friend." Seeing that Chen Daoxuan was unwilling to buy the magic weapon in his shop, the shopkeeper's attitude also turned cold. "Whether in our casual cultivator market or the core commercial area, the probability of you being able to buy a brand new magic weapon is too low." After saying that, the shopkeeper said no more. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan paused, bowed and left the shop. Chapter 17. A market in tight supply. Fellow Daoist, you are joking. If you have a way to buy a brand new magic weapon from a weapon refiner, our store is willing to buy it at the market price. In another magic weapon store in the Senexai Fang market, the shopkeeper said sarcastically. Chen Daoxuan was not angry when he heard this, but smiled and said goodbye. Humph. Watching Chen Daoxuan leave, the shopkeeper of the magic weapon store looked unhappy. If this was not Guang'an Prefecture, he would have taught a lesson to a mere key refining level 3 cultivator with such a frivolous attitude. It took a whole morning. Chen Daoxuan almost ran through all the magic weapon stores in the Senexai Fang market. There was only one conclusion. The magic weapon market in Guang'an Prefecture was in a state of serious supply and demand. Not to mention brand new magic weapons, even second-hand goods with slightly better quality would be snapped up by Senexai in a short time, and at the price of normal magic weapons. Generally speaking, the price of a first-level magic weapon ranges from dozens of spirit stones to hundreds of spirit stones. Even the most exquisite first-grade magic tools usually do not cost more than 1,000 spirit stones. In short, according to Chen Daoxuan's investigation results in the morning, there is a lot of room for opening a magic tool shop in Sanxiu Fangshi to sell magic tools. Moreover, compared with the problem of difficulty in purchasing and renting shops in the core business district, it does not exist at all in Sanxiu Fangshi. Along the way, he even saw several shops that were empty and waiting to be rented and sold. The reason is that the Sanxiu who set up stalls on the street have taken up a lot of business from the shops. If the things in the shop are worth the money, it would be fine. The key is that the shops sell only second-hand and inferior goods. In this case, Sanxiu might as well try their luck at the street stalls, at least the prices there are cheap. If you are lucky, you may be able to find some treasures at a low price from the Sanxiu sellers, who don't know the goods. After investigating the magic tool shops in Sanxiu Fangshi, it was already noon. Thinking that there were only a few hours left before the appointment with Chen Ziyan, Chen Daoxuan simply went to the largest street stall market in Sanxiu Fangshi. Entering the street stall market, Chen Daoxuan had the illusion of visiting a flea market in his previous life. If the items on the stalls were not all kinds of spiritual talismans, array plates, spiritual minerals and the like used by cultivators, he would really have the feeling of returning to earth in a dream. Shaking his head and throwing away the unrealistic thoughts in his mind, Chen Daoxuan identified a stall and walked over. Dao. Chen Daoxuan bowed to the casual cultivator who was selling the stall. I wonder how much you sell this array plate for. The casual cultivator who was selling the stall was a middle-aged man with a beard, who looked quite honest. Seeing a customer coming, the middle-aged stall owner with a beard stood up from the meditation mat and rubbed his hands, saying, "Fellow Daoist, you have good eyesight. This array is called the Wind and Thunder Array. It carries a small wind and thunder array inside. After activation, it can set up a wind and thunder array within a radius of 10 feet around you. It can trap and kill enemies and has a certain protective effect. It can be said to be a very comprehensive magic weapon." He pointed to a bagware array with cracks on the surface of the stall. "Thank you for 100 spirit stones." The bearded stall owner stretched out a finger and said with a smile. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan said calmly, "Can I try it?" "Go ahead." The middle-aged stall owner with a beard was quite generous and waved his hand. Chen Daoxuan nodded, picked up the wind and thunder array, and injected a stream of true energy. Who knew that the wind and thunder array that was praised by the bearded stall owner flickered a few times and suddenly went out. Not only that, the entire array plate simply broke apart along the cracks, turning into a pile of debris and falling to the ground. Chen Daoxuan, bearded stall owner. The atmosphere was slightly awkward. Chen Daoxuan wanted to buy this array plate because he was interested in this array type magic weapon that was not recorded in the family's refining heritage. Unexpectedly, he, a refiner, actually missed it. This was not a slightly damaged magic weapon at all, but a magic weapon on the verge of being scrapped. The bearded stall owner in front of him was clearly fishing. Sure enough, when the bearded stall owner saw that Chen Daoxuan broken his magic weapon, he immediately shouted righteously, "What do you mean, Dao? Why did you damage my magic weapon worth 100 spirit stones for no reason? I didn't expect that Dao, who is so young and handsome, would do such a thing." Soon, the loud voice of the bearded stall owner attracted the attention of pedestrians and stall owners around him, and people gradually gathered around, pointing and watching the excitement. "That damn Zhangsun is blackmailing people again. This young Taoist friend looks quite unfamiliar. It's time to watch something interesting." There were also cultivators in the key refining stage who had a slightly higher cultivation level who started to make a fuss. "Zhangsan, 100 spirit stones may not be enough for your formation plate. You should need at least 1000 spirit stones." The bearded stall owner named Zhangsan became very annoyed when he heard someone making a fuss to ruin his business. He looked in the direction of the voice and found that it was Wei Laogdi, a stall owner in the 9th level of key refining stage nearby. He immediately stopped making a fuss. With the intention of retreating in his heart, Zhangsan was not so hard on his words. He waved his hands and said in a generous manner, "Forget it, forget it. Seeing your young age, I'm afraid that you are also a junior who has just entered the immortal path. I will not make it difficult for you." Pretending to be polite, Zhangsan continued, "Besides, I agreed to let you try the wind and thunder array. I'm also half responsible for this matter. How about this? You compensate me with 50 spirit stones, and this matter will be over." After saying this, he pretended to be taking advantage. Chen Daoxuan was almost laughed at by his rogue look, and shook his head and said, "No matter. Hey, kid, I tell you not to refuse a toast and drink a penalty." The bearded man threatened, "Don't think I can't teach you a lesson in Guang'an Prefecture." After saying this, he rolled up his sleeves and pretended to teach Chen Daoxuan a lesson. Who knew that Chen Daoxuan looked at him quietly, unmoved at all. Seeing him like this, the bearded man named Zhangsan was in trouble. Taking action in Guang'an Prefecture Immortal City means provoking the Guang'an Prefecture Zhao family. Even if the bearded stall owner had 180 guts, he would not dare to do so. Now, he was in a dilemma. It was not right to take action, nor was it right not to take action. In addition, the people around him kept making noises, and Zhangsan felt like he was riding a tiger and couldn't get off. The situation was deadlocked. Soon, the Zhao family's patrolling and law enforcement disciples rushed over. Make way. Make way. Make way. The law enforcement team is here. Make way. After a moment, two Zhao family law enforcement team monks wearing fire spirit pearl green robes pushed through the crowd and squeezed in. What's going on? What are you two doing? Seeing the monks of the law enforcement team, the bearded stall owner's face suddenly changed, and he quickly bowed and begged for mercy. It's okay. It's okay. I'm just joking with this little brother. Is that so? The law enforcement team monk looked at Chen Daoxuan and asked. Chen Daoxuan glanced at the bearded stall owner and saw that he looked like he was begging for mercy. He nodded and said, "We had a small dispute over the price of the magic weapon. It's no big deal." Seeing that the victim was willing to keep quiet, the law enforcement monks were unwilling to pursue the matter. Before leaving, the older law enforcement monk warned the bearded stall owner, "Zhang-san, don't cause trouble here, otherwise your luck won't be as good as last time." "Yes, yes, Zhang-san, save it." Nodding and bowing, Zhang-san sent the two law enforcement monks away. Seeing that there was no excitement, the crowd gradually dispersed, and the surrounding stalls resumed shouting. "Brother, thank you for what you did just now." The bearded stall owner bowed to Chen Daoxuan solemnly. "Don't be in a hurry to thank me. Let me ask you, where did you get this wind and thunder array plate?" Chen Daoxuan pointed to the debris on the ground and asked. Chapter 18 Water Spirit Pearl. Hearing this, the bearded stall owner's face was embarrassed. After a while, he shook his head and said, "Sorry, I can't tell you about this." "But," the bearded stall owner paused, "if I'm not mistaken, you should not be a casual cultivator, right?" "Oh." Chen Daoxuan became interested after hearing this, and said without comment, "How did you know?" "In that situation just now, if it was a novice casual cultivator, he would definitely panic." "I see that you are not afraid at all." "Which family you are from?" "I don't know whether you are from the Wu family, the Zhao family or the Yang family." Although the bearded man named Zhang-san looked rough, he was very thoughtful. At this moment, he actually inquired about Chen Daoxuan's background. The three Immortal Cultivation families he just mentioned were the most famous foundation building families in the 100,000 mile sea area, except for the Zhao family. Chen Daoxuan shook his head. "Dao, don't ask. I'm not from a foundation building family, but from a small family. I'm not worth mentioning." Zhang-san was embarrassed when Chen Daoxuan revealed his thoughts. After thinking for a while, as if he had made up his mind, the bearded man whispered in Chen Daoxuan's ear, "Dao, are you interested in the refining method of the wind and thunder array?" Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan was delighted. He didn't expect to have an unexpected gain. "Indeed, I'm interested. Our family plans to train a refiner in recent years, and is collecting the refining methods of various magic tools." Hearing this, Zhang-san could not help but respect. Families that can train refiners are all big families with strong strength. After all, it is not so easy to collect a refining inheritance. Ordinary key refining families do not have the strength to train refiners. Thinking of this, Zhang-san's tone was a little humble. "Dao, don't blame me. I was just reckless." As he said this, Zhang-san bowed deeply to Chen Daoxuan. Chen Daoxuan naturally would not bother with the other party for what happened just now. Otherwise he would not have let the other party go when the Zhao family law enforcement cultivator was here. Zhang-san also knew what to choose at this moment. He took out a jade slip from his storage bag and said in a voice transmission, "Dao, please look. This is the method of refining the wind and thunder array plate." Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan took the jade slip in his hand and used his spiritual sense to investigate. The next moment, a large amount of information about refining array plates and magic tools poured into Chen Daoxuan's sea of consciousness. However, because he had been fooled once, Chen Daoxuan was particularly cautious this time. After careful identification, he found that the things recorded in this jade slip should be true. Chen Daoxuan said calmly, "I wonder how much this jade slip costs?" Hearing this, Zhang-san raised 5 fingers. "I see that Dao is sincere in buying it, so the price is 500 spirit stones." After saying this, the casual cultivator named Zhang-san looked at Chen Daoxuan nervously. 500 spirit stones is a huge fortune for a casual cultivator in the key refining stage, and Zhang San couldn't help but be nervous. If it were outside Guang'an Prefecture, many cultivators would take risks for this money. Seeing Zhang San's thief-like appearance, Chen Daoxuan nodded. Okay. 500 spirit stones are used to buy a method of refining a formation plate magic weapon. This deal is not a loss for him. Maybe casual cultivators will not buy this method of refining, but for Chen Daoxuan, who is determined to develop and expand his family, adding heritage to the family is a matter that will not lose money. The two discussed it and deliberately chose to go to the inn to open a guest room to complete the transaction. Trade openly in the street market. Not to mention Zhang San didn't dare, Chen Daoxuan didn't dare either. 500 spirit stones are not a small number. If they are placed on the ground, they can be piled up into a small mountain. If they are traded openly, it will inevitably attract thieves to pee. Based on the principle of less trouble is worse than more trouble, both of them carefully chose to trade in the inn. After Zhang San finished the transaction, he bowed to Chen Daoxuan and left the SYNOPSIS market. With such a large amount of spiritual stones, Zhang San must be more guilty than anyone else. After all, in terms of cultivation, he is only a little higher than Chen Daoxuan, only the 4th level of key refining. On the other hand, Chen Daoxuan was in a very good mood. It has only been half a day since he came to the SYNOPSIS market, and he has obtained a method of refining a magic weapon that is rarely seen in normal times. And it is not a common attacking magic weapon or a defensive magic weapon, but an auxiliary magic weapon such as a formation plate. With this good mood, Chen Daoxuan continued to work hard and continued to visit the street market. When he walked to the place where Zhang San had just set up his stall, it was now occupied by another SYNOPSIS. Shaking his head, Chen Daoxuan continued to walk forward. Only when he walked in front of a haggard old man in black robes did Chen Daoxuan stop. He had an impression of this cultivator in front of him. When he and Zhang San had a conflict just now, it was this old man in black robes who kept stirring up trouble for Zhang San. In a sense, it was a relief for Chen Daoxuan. Compared with Zhang San's mercenary enthusiasm, the old man in black robe had a cool aura. Even though Chen Daoxuan was standing in front of him, he just pretended not to see him and continued to sit on the futon with his eyes closed and meditate silently. Because monks practice in seclusion for many years, their personalities are prone to be eccentric and weird, and Chen Daoxuan was not surprised by this. Senior, I wonder how much you sell this water spirit bead. Seeing a spirit bead emitting pure water spirit energy on the stall, Chen Daoxuan asked with surprise. Water spirit bead is a unique cultivation resource produced by the Zhao family of Lingbai Island. This spirit bead has the effect of filtering and purifying spiritual energy. In other words, when a monk absorbs the spiritual energy filtered and purified by the water spirit bead, the efficiency of refining spiritual energy will increase significantly, thereby accelerating the speed of cultivation. Of course, this kind of treasure also has a time limit. Generally speaking, a first level water spirit bead can only be used for a month at most, and then it will lose the effect of purifying spiritual energy and become an ordinary pearl. Under normal circumstances, it is difficult for such treasures to fall into the hands of casual cultivators. They are basically ordered in advance by major families. I wonder how the old man in front of me got them. When the old man in black robe heard Chen Daoxuan's question, he opened his wrinkled eyes and said coldly, 100 spirit stones. Sorry, no bargaining. Chen Daoxuan, who was originally full of joy, was stunned when he heard this. According to the market price, the first level water spirit bead cultivated by the Zhao family only costs 50 spirit stones, but the old man in black robe in front of him doubled it. No wonder no one has bought it after so many people have come and gone for so long. This is no longer a premium, it is simply robbery. It may be that no one has bought it for too long. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's regretful expression, the old man in black robe explained, my friend, please take a closer look. This water spirit bead is a top grade first level spirit bead. Although 100 spirit stones are a bit more expensive, water spirit beads are precious, and it is normal to have a premium. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan was skeptical. After all, he had never seen the water spirit beads sold by the Zhao family. He could recognize this bead because his uncle 13 had told him about the characteristics of this spirit bead. Whatever you want, my friend. Seeing that Chen Daoxuan was still hesitating, the old man who was not good at selling simply closed his eyes and stopped asking. Okay, 100 spirit stones is 100 spirit stones. Water spirit beads are difficult to buy. If it is really as the old man said, it is not too bad. In addition, the old man has just gone too far for Chen Daoxuan, and buying him a spirit bead at a premium is also a token of his gratitude for his help. Just when the two had just completed the transaction. Woo woo woo. A shrill alarm suddenly rang throughout the Guang'an Prefecture Immortal City. Chapter 19 Monster attacks the city. Listening to the shrill and urgent alarm sounding in his ears, Chen Daoxuan raised his head unconsciously. Senior, it's the alarm of the monster attacking Guang'an Prefecture. The black-robed old man who had been sitting cross-legged stood up and said in a deep voice, monster attacking the city? Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan's face suddenly became ugly. Obviously, this sentence evoked some not so good memories deep in his heart. Changping County of Shuanghu Island was attacked by monsters that year, and his parents in this life all died in the mouth of monsters. If he had not been fortunate enough to be saved by his 13th uncle Chen Zian, they would have died long ago. Therefore, when Chen Daoxuan heard that Guang'an Prefecture was attacked by monsters, his first reaction was not fear, but deep hatred. Seeing that Chen Daoxuan was emotional, the old man seemed to mistakenly think that he was afraid and comforted him. Don't worry, Guang'an Prefecture has been attacked by monsters for more than 1 or 2 days. You will get used to it. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan was quite surprised. Senior, why is this? Isn't Guang'an Prefecture the territory of the Zhao family? With the strength of the Zhao family, how could it be attacked by monsters? Hearing this, the old man pointed to the water spirit bead in Chen Daoxuan's hand and said, have you ever heard of the mermaids? Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan remembered a description of the mermaids he had read in the ancient books of his family. There are mermaids in the South China Sea, living in the deep sea. Their voices are confusing. They are good at raising spirit shells and controlling sea beasts. However, he had always regarded the records in the ancient books as legends, and he didn't expect that there really were mermaids in this world. Chen Daoxuan replied, I have seen it in ancient books, but what is the connection between this and the monsters attacking Guang'an Prefecture? Could it be related to this water spirit bead? Seeing the old man in black robe pointing at the water spirit bead in his hand, Chen Daoxuan had a vague guess in his heart. You guessed right. The old man in black robe nodded. It's because of this Lingsu. Lingbei Island is the largest Lingbei breeding farm of the Zhao family in Guang'an Prefecture. But in order to breed Lingbei, female mermaids must be captured. Every year, the Zhao family's mermaid catching fleet will capture female mermaids in the nearby waters. It seems that this year the Zhao family has poked a hornet's nest of mermaid tribe again. At this point, the old man in black robe had a hint of gloating in his tone. The casual cultivators have always been hostile to the Immortal Cultivation families. It's not that they don't like them, but that the Immortal Cultivation families occupy too many cultivation resources, and the two sides have deep conflicts. If the Carnean Sword sect hadn't chosen to attack the Chuan kingdom and transfer this conflict, the Wangxing Sea might have been in chaos by now. Chen Daoxuan didn't care about gloating. He immediately remembered that his own Kanglan cargo ship was still anchored at the port of Guang'an Prefecture. Since this monster came from the sea, wouldn't their family's cargo ship be the first to suffer? Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan said goodbye and said, Senior, I will go ahead. My ship is still parked at the port. Thank you for helping me out. Hearing Chen Daoxuan mention the cargo ship, the black-robed old man slapped his thigh and said, oh no, my ship is also parked there. It's no wonder he was anxious. The black-robed old man's ship is much higher grade than the cargo ship of the Chen family in Shuanghu Island. It was a magical vessel that he ordered from the Yang family, a foundation building family, at a high price. It cost him more than 800 spirit stones. How could he not be anxious? Thinking of this, the black-robed old man didn't care about Chen Daoxuan. He immediately put the stall into the storage bag, used the wind control technique, and flew towards the outer city of Guang'an Prefecture. Not only him, but all the other cultivators who reacted, flew into the air, and flew towards the outer city of Guang'an Prefecture. Due to the attack of the monster beast, the forbidden air formation of the Guang'an Prefecture Immortal City had been lifted as soon as possible. At this moment, Chen Daoxuan saw the most spectacular scene he had ever seen in this life. Hundreds of thousands of cultivators from Guang'an Prefecture flew in the air in groups, heading for the harbor of Guang'an Prefecture. This scene was so spectacular that it could be described as covering the sky and the sun. Without taking time to sigh, Chen Daoxuan followed the crowd and flew towards the harbor. When Chen Daoxuan found his own ship, he found that his 13th uncle had already stood on the deck of the Kanglang. 13th uncle. Chen Daoxuan lowered his body and bowed to Chen Zian. Yes. Seeing his nephew, Chen Zian smiled and nodded, then looked at the dark mass of monsters on the sea in the distance with a serious face, and said with a little concern, "It seems that the mermaid tribe that the Zhao family provoked this time is not small." Chen Daoxuan glanced at the sea, but he was not too worried. After these days of understanding, he knew how terrifying the strength of the Zhao family in Guang'an Prefecture was. Although there were many monsters in front of him, if he looked closely, he would find that they were all low-level monsters that were not ranked. Not to mention the Zhao family of Guang'an Prefecture. Even if the scattered cultivators of Guang'an Prefecture joined forces, they could easily kill them. After all, although there are many monsters, there are more independent cultivators. And the average strength of each cultivator far exceeds that of these monsters. Looking at Chen Daoxuan, Chen Zian said with some worry, "Such a large group of monsters will definitely not be completely resisted by the Zhao family cultivators. If there are any that slip through the net, remember not to rush too far forward, just protect the family's cargo ship." He was not afraid that the escaped monsters would hurt Chen Daoxuan. After all, most of these monsters were low-level monsters, and Chen Daoxuan's strength was more than enough to deal with them. He was just afraid that Chen Daoxuan would rush into the monster group in his youth. By then, once the true energy was exhausted, even monsters that were not of grade could pose a threat to the cultivator's life. As the dark masses of cultivators continued to arrive, the two sides actually confronted each other on the narrow coastline of Guang'an Prefecture. Looking at the endless group of cultivators in front of them, Chen Zian and his nephew suddenly became calm. Since their cargo ship was parked relatively close to the inside, and there were a lot of cargo ships outside blocking them, at this moment, all these cargo ships became their natural barriers. Although the cultivators standing in the front position were cursing in their hearts, they could only swallow their anger in order to protect their own cargo ships. Of course, the cultivators of the Zhao family were at the forefront. After all, Guang'an Prefecture was their territory, and it was their responsibility to protect the peace of Guang'an Prefecture. Not to mention that this disaster was caused by his Zhao family. In a relaxed mood, Chen Zian couldn't help but tease. It seems that the Yang family is about to smile crookedly this time. The Yang family he mentioned was the largest foundation building family in the 100,000-mile sea area, and its status was only lower than that of the Zhao family in Guang'an Prefecture. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's doubts, Chen Zian explained, "The Yang family is the largest cargo ship trader in the nearby sea area. Our family's Kanglan was purchased from the Yang family shipping company. I'm afraid that many fellow Taoists' cargo ships will be damaged in this monster attack." How can his Yang family not laugh? As soon as the voice fell, a piercing scream pierced the sky. Ah! Hearing this scream, Chen Daoxuan felt his heart pounding, and then he felt like vomiting. Seeing this, Chen Daoxuan quickly circulated the true key in his danshan, and then he suppressed the nausea. After finishing, he glanced at Chen Zian, and found that his uncle was as pale as himself. This is a high-level mermaid. Chen Zian's face was as dark as water. What kind of trouble did the Zhao family get into this time? Chapter 20. The fish that slipped through the net. Along with this piercing scream, the monsters on the sea line in the distance rushed towards Guang'an Prefecture like crazy. Because the number of monsters was too large, it even triggered a tsunami. Seeing the terrifying power of the tsunami, all the monks present changed color. At the front line, at this moment, the Zhao family monks at the forefront all had gloomy faces. The Zhao family never expected that it was just catching mermaids like in previous years. Why this time it caused such a big trouble? No matter what, the mermaids have come to the door, and the Zhao family cannot retreat. Otherwise, the reputation that the Zhao family has established in the 100,000-mile sea area for thousands of years will be destroyed. Thinking of this, the leading purple mansion monk shouted, "Zhao family disciples, listen to the order. Form a formation to resist the enemy." As the order fell, in less than half a cup of tea, a super large formation was set up in front of the coastline. All the Zhao family members held their breath, waiting for the monsters to attack. Sword formation. Rise. With a command, flying swords pierced the sky, forming a powerful sword formation, and rushed towards the surging monsters. At this moment, it seemed that there were only the surging monsters and the brilliant sword formation rising from the ground in this world. Boom. In the blink of an eye, the sword formation and the tsunami collided with each other, and a loud noise like the collision of heaven and earth broke out. In just a moment, the seawater was dyed into blood, and a large number of monster corpses floated on the sea. This scene was also seen by the casual cultivators in the back, and everyone relaxed. Low-level monsters are low-level monsters. Even if there are amazing numbers, they can't cause any waves in the end. Chen Daoxuan, who was floating in the air, saw the scene of the Zhao family cultivators fighting against the monsters in the sea, and sighed. The Zhao family is really strong. What Chen Daoxuan saw was the strength of the Zhao family, which was not only reflected in the strength of the Zhao family's children. It is also reflected in the fact that the Zhao family's children are well trained as a whole, and they are completely different from the casual cultivators, who can only show their personal courage. At the moment, the strongest wave of attacks gathered by the monsters was defeated by the Zhao family, and all that was left was to strangle the scattered monsters. These frightened monsters fled in all directions, and no matter how desperately the mermaids behind them howled and commanded, it was of no avail. We won. Seeing this scene, Chen Daoxuan, who had been through many battles, instantly judged the situation. Sure enough, as Chen Daoxuan judged, the seemingly large number of monsters was not the enemy of the Zhao family. After just one collision, they were defeated. Next, the Zhao family cultivators and the Guanghan prefecture casual cultivators cleaned up the fleeing monsters. Compared with defeating a large group of monsters, this cleaning work seemed to be more laborious. Because these monsters were too good at running around, the Zhao family cultivators had to ensure that no one escaped. Otherwise, if the monsters entered the Guanghan prefecture river, they would probably pose a great threat to the Zhao family mortals. After all, compared with cultivators, mortals have no ability to protect themselves when facing monsters. Even mortal warriors of the 9th level of innateness are likely to be killed when facing these inferior monsters, not to mention those mortals who do not know martial arts. Fortunately, there are sailboats all over the harbor of Guanghan Prefecture. At this moment, these sailboats have become a natural protective barrier for Guanghan Prefecture. It is almost impossible for the scattered monsters to cross these ships and enter the inner waterway of Guanghan Prefecture. On the Kanglang, Chen Daoxuan and Chen Daoxuan stood side by side. Originally, Chen Daoxuan thought he could kill a monster with his own hands, but now it seems that they are probably just watching the excitement of this battle. Although it is impossible to count the number of monsters. But one thing is certain, there are definitely not as many as the cultivators present. In addition, most of the monsters were killed by the Zhao family cultivators, and it is conceivable how many of them are left when it is their turn to take action. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's eager expression, Chen Daoxuan laughed and said, "Most of these are inferior monsters. Even if we kill them, their bodies are of no use to cultivators like us. Why waste the effort?" Chen Daoxuan laughed and said, "I know, but I just feel itchy." Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan was speechless. Monks practice in seclusion all year round. They have powerful strength, but cannot use it. After a long time, they will become ill. This is why monks often fight fiercely over a disagreement. To use the words of the previous life, it is to carry a sharp blade and kill naturally. What's more, the monks are no longer carrying sharp blades, but have the power to destroy the world. How can they not be irritable? Chen Daoxuan was about to say something when the Kanglang shook suddenly. Oh no, it's a tiger-eyed fish. Chen Daoxuan swept his consciousness and found a strange fish about 10 feet long with 4 blood red eyes on its head, which was hitting and biting the hull of the Kanglang. What a beast. Seeing this beast destroy the family's only cargo ship, the Kanglang, how could Chen Daoxuan bear it? He immediately sacrificed a flying sword and slashed at the tiger eye fish in the sea. Wow. The sword on the flying sword shone, and it only turned in the sea once before breaking through the water. The next second, the impact of the Kanglang stopped. After a while, a stream of blood surged up from the sea and then floated to the surface of the sea. The body of the monster called the tiger eye fish by Chen Daoxuan. Chen Daoxuan looked closely. This monster called the tiger eye fish had been broken into 2 pieces. After thinking about it, Chen Daoxuan used his true energy to take the body of the tiger eye fish from the sea and hung it in front of him to observe carefully. This was the first time he observed a monster so carefully. 10 years ago, during the monster riot in Changping County, he was only afraid and didn't see what the monster looked like. Is this a monster? It's really weak. Chen Daoxuan murmured. Who knows that after hearing this, Chen Daoxuan's expression became serious. He shook his head and said, the monster is not weak. This tiger eye fish is not so much a monster as it is a beast infected by demonic power. A real first level monster is not so easy to deal with. At this point, Chen Daoxuan seemed to remember something and warned, if you encounter a monster of the same level of cultivation alone in the future, remember not to fight it desperately. It is difficult for ordinary cultivators to be the opponent of monsters alone. Yeah. Chen Daoxuan nodded, indicating that he remembered it. He knew that in terms of rich experience, Uncle 13, the old fox in the world of cultivation, was far ahead of him. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's regretful look, Chen Daoxuan said unhappily, don't be so stinky. The next monster is for you to kill. I'll scavenge for you, okay? Okay. Chen Daoxuan smiled and nodded, then threw the body of the tiger eye fish into the sea. Chen Daoxuan had just finished speaking when a monster emitting a strong demonic aura swam towards the location of the Kanglang. First level monster. Not far away, a cultivator also discovered the monster in the sea and exclaimed, damn it, what did the Zhao family and the people in front do? How could they let the first level monster come here? The cultivators around complained bitterly, as if attracted by the blood of the tiger eye fish. This first level monster swam near the Kanglang and did not leave. It began to eat the corpse of the tiger eye fish. The Kanglang ship is about 50 feet long, which is about 160 meters. Although it is not a big cargo ship, it is a huge monster compared to the inferior monster such as the tiger eye fish. However, the first level monster in front of him, just the length of the back exposed to the sea, is longer than the mast of the Kanglang. Its whole body length is probably more than 20 feet. Having lived 2 lives as a human, this is the largest creature Chen Daoxuan has ever seen. Even with his temperament, he couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. Fortunately, the monster was eating and didn't seem to have any intention of attacking the Kanglang. Chapter 21 Temporary Team. Seeing this, Chen Daoxuan also became nervous. The body of the tiger eye fish was only 10 feet long. With the size of this first level monster, it would only take a few minutes to eat it. I thought that this time I was just following the Zhao family to cheer for them, but I didn't expect to encounter such a crisis. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan instructed, this monster should not be able to fly. If you can't defeat it later, just abandon the ship and run for your life. At this time, Chen Daoxuan would not show off his ability. After all, his cultivation level was just the 3rd level of key refining. Even if he had experienced 3 sudden realizations on the way to Guang'an Prefecture, and his wind-chasing sword art had reached a state beyond the great success, it was probably far from enough to deal with this huge monster. Unless he was willing to use the trump card of the flying snow sword. But using the flying snow sword consumes too much true energy. Once he fails to achieve success, he may even lose the ability to escape due to the exhaustion of true energy, which would be a tragedy. While he was hesitating, a familiar voice came into the ears of Chen Daoxuan and others. Everyone, this is a first stage late stage demon beast, a blood spotted sea snake, and its cultivation is equivalent to that of a late stage key refining cultivator. If we don't stop it in time, with the destructive power of this demon beast, our ships will probably be destroyed soon. As he spoke, an old man in a black robe floated in the air. Chen Daoxuan recognized at a glance that this man was the black-robed old man who sold his water spirit pearl in the Sinexiu market. Unexpectedly, his cargo ship was also nearby. After listening to the black-robed old man's narration, everyone understood that the only way to save their own ships was to kill this blood-spotted sea snake. Soon, including the black-robed old man, the 7 nearby key refining cultivators reached a consensus to kill this demon beast together. However, among these 7 key refining cultivators, only the black-robed old man had reached the 9th level of key refining. As for the others, the highest cultivation was Chen Daoxuan, a key refining mid-stage cultivator who was at the 6th level of key refining. It was hard to say whether such a temporary team could kill this demon beast. However, for the sake of their own cargo ships, these casual cultivators with clean pockets had no choice. Glancing at the crowd, the black-robed old man seemed to recognize Chen Daoxuan. After nodding slightly to him, he arranged the tactics to kill the blood-spotted sea snake. Everyone, the blood-spotted sea snake is not only huge in size, but also a common venomous snake in the sea. When you kill the monster later, remember to take the detoxification pill in advance. Hearing this, a cultivator who was only at the 2nd level of key refining said with embarrassment, "Senior, I don't have any detoxification pills." Hearing this, the black-robed old man took out a jade bottle, took out a turquoise transparent pill from it, and flicked it into the hands of the cultivator at the 2nd level of key refining. "Thank you for your gift, senior." The black-robed old man nodded, glanced at the crowd and said, "Who else doesn't have a detoxification pill?" I don't. And me. Everyone spoke up. In the end, this improvised team actually didn't have detoxification pills except for Chen Daoxuan and his nephew. Of course, not everyone has it. Maybe someone just wants to take advantage of the old man in black robe. The old man in black robe knows about this kind of people, but in order to protect his valuable cargo ship, he has to pay this price. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to kill this blood-spotted sea snake alone. After a pause, the old man in black robe continued, "I will use the ice binding technique with all my strength later, which can at least trap this beast for 3 breaths. You can take advantage of this gap to kill the monster together. Is that okay?" Seeing that someone is willing to take the lead, everyone naturally has no different opinions, and nodded in agreement. After reaching a consensus, the old man in black robe did not waste any words and immediately cast the ice binding technique. As the spell was cast, everyone saw a huge ice vine about 100 feet long was stimulated from the old man in black robe, directly freezing the blood-spotted sea snake that was eating in the sea. The power of the ice binding technique was amazing. It not only froze the monster, but also froze the nearby seawater into ice. "Don't do it yet." The black-robed old man's face flushed and he shouted. Before he could speak, Chen Daoxuan took the lead and used the red shadow flying sword to slash at the frozen monster. With the blessing of the great wind-chasing sword art, the red shadow flying sword light flickered and exuded a terrifying aura, which attracted Chen Daoxuan's attention. "This is the great wind-chasing sword art." Chen Daoxuan was shocked. In fact, Chen Daoxuan's attainment in the wind-chasing sword art seemed to be higher than his, but how is this possible? He clearly remembered that his nephew had clearly obtained the wind-chasing sword art from him before coming to Guang'an Prefecture. At most, Chen Daoxuan had only been exposed to this sword art for a month. In just 1 month, he actually cultivated this sword art to the great success realm, and it's not just an ordinary great success realm. Impossible. Chen Daoxuan had only this thought in his mind, and he was distracted, so that his sword speed slowed down a bit. Others didn't know what Chen Daoxuan was thinking. Everyone used all their strength and showed their best skills to attack the blood-spotted sea snake. For a while, the space was filled with flashing swords, flying fireballs, and lightning. It looked quite impressive. In fact, except for Chen Daoxuan, Chen Daoxuan and a few others who could cause a little damage to the blood-spotted sea snake, other cultivators could hardly cause any damage to this late-stage blood-spotted sea snake due to their low cultivation and poor quality of magic tools. The most exaggerated one was the cultivator of the 2nd level of key refining with the lowest cultivation in the team. He seemed to have limited magic skills, and the magic tool he used was a black iron flying sword that he had made and refined himself. When Chen Daoxuan saw this flying sword, he was almost stunned. He had always regarded casual cultivators refining black iron as a magic tool as a joke, and he never thought that someone would actually do this in reality. When the key refining level 2 cultivator used the black iron flying sword to slash the blood-spotted sea snake's body, it didn't even scratch its skin, leaving only a string of sparks, which really shocked everyone. Seeing this scene, the black-robed old man was anxious and angry. He kept scolding everyone for being useless, but there was no good way. He needed to continuously inject true energy into the ice, compressed to trap this ferocious sea snake. Otherwise, when the blood-spotted sea snake breaks through the ice, even if everyone can fly and escape, everyone's ship will inevitably be destroyed by the mad blood-spotted sea snake. This is something the black-robed old man can never tolerate. Crack, crack, crack. Perhaps because he was concerned about the battle situation, the black-robed old man injected true energy a little slower. The ice layer that originally froze the blood-spotted sea snake actually cracked. Not good. This beast is going to get out. Everyone, do your best, otherwise all our ships will be lost. As soon as the voice fell, the ice layer on the tail of the blood-spotted sea snake was the first to break. A cylindrical black shadow broke through the ice on the sea surface. Chen Daoxuan could even see the bloody pattern on the tail as big as a human head. Boom. The huge tail of the blood-spotted sea snake hit a cargo ship next to the Kanglang. Instantly, the cargo ship was smashed in half by the monster. Countless wood chips and limbs floated on the sea. Ah! My ship. Die, you evil beast. Die. Seeing this, a cultivator in the team was furious, and used his flying sword to attack the blood-spotted sea snake like crazy. However, his cultivation was only the 3rd level of key refining, and the power of the flying sword was insufficient. Even if he was angry, how much damage could he cause to the monster? Seeing this scene, Chen Daoxuan's face was dark, and Chen Zion was even more reluctant to retreat. In his eyes, the Kanglang was important, but it was far less important than the safety of his nephew. If Chen Daoxuan was injured, it would be a thunderbolt for the Chen family of Xuanhu Island. Thinking of this, Chen Zion shook his head slightly at Chen Daoxuan, and gave him a look, signaling him to retreat in time. Chen Daoxuan understood Chen Zion's look, but thinking that he still had to rely on the Kanglang to transport supplies, if there was no Kanglang, not to mention the loss of spiritual stones, the process of returning home would be very troublesome. After weighing it for a moment, Chen Daoxuan's eyes became firm. Uncle 13, I want to give it a try. Si estás escuchando esta novela en canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas. Significa que descargaran y subirán sin esfuerzo te invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas y encontrarás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos géneros. Te esperamos para sumergirte en mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 22, Snow Demon's Lair. Give it a try? How to try? Chen Zion was already shocked by his nephew's great success in the wind-chasing sword art. Now the other party actually said that he wanted to kill this late-stage first-order demon snake. How could Chen Zion believe it? He was about to dissuade him. The roar of the old man in black robes rang in everyone's ears again. Everyone be careful, this beast is about to escape. As soon as the voice fell on the erected body of the blood-spotted sea snake, the ice layer gradually cracked, and ice chips fell on the sea surface, splashing huge water. Hiss. The blood-spotted sea snake burst into a shocking hiss. Everyone felt a chill rushing to their foreheads. Chen Zion even found that the 2nd level key refining cultivator with the lowest cultivation among the crowd was frightened by the power of this demon snake and trembled. It's over. The old man in black robes cried in his heart. But no matter how unwilling he was, he had no choice but to escape at this moment. The blood-spotted sea snake shook its huge body, and countless ice chips fell into the sea, or on the frozen sea surface, making a thumping sound. It looked like the demon snake was about to escape. Just when everyone was in despair, a sword beam pierced the sky. The sword was snow white, and the sword beam was nearly 10 feet long. Even at a distance of hundreds of feet, everyone could feel the cold breath and terrifying power emanating from this flying sword. The sword beam is 9 feet long. A first-class flying sword. Is this a first-class magic weapon? It's dead. The demon snake is dead. Die. Die. Haha. When the black-robed old man saw the sword, a feeling of fear suddenly emerged in his heart. Obviously, the power of this sword was enough to threaten his life. At this moment, Chen Daoxuan only felt that the air in front of the flying sword became extremely sticky, as if something was preventing him from exerting the full power of the flying sword. But this feeling flashed, and then, in the eyes of others, the flying snow sword is not only terrifyingly powerful, but also as fast as a rainbow. Compared with them, Chen Daoxuan's flying sword is more than twice as fast. This is also the performance of the chasing wind sword art. After reaching the great perfection realm, not only does the speed of the flying sword increase by 1 time after controlling the sword, but the power also increases by nearly 70%. The first grade top grade flying snow sword, coupled with the chasing wind sword art that increases the power of the flying sword by 70%, created this amazing sword at this moment. Hiss. Facing this sword, the blood-spotted sea snake with its snake body erected also felt a fatal threat. It was seen twisting its snake body desperately, trying to avoid the edge of the flying snow sword. But it had just escaped from the ice binding technique of the black-robed old man, and its body was still stiff at this moment. In addition, the speed of the flying snow sword was too fast, so it could not dodge at all. Swish. It was like the sound of a hot knife cutting butter. This blood-spotted sea snake, which was more than 20 feet long and about 10 feet in diameter, was beheaded by Chen Daoxuan with a sword. Seeing this scene, the old man in black robe was stunned at first, and then overjoyed. After taking a breath of Danshan Qi, he immediately used the ice binding technique again to freeze the body of the demon snake that was swinging around because of the loss of its head. Half a cup of tea later, as the last trace of vitality of the demon snake disappeared under the erosion of the ice power of the ice binding technique, the sea surface finally calmed down again. Is it dead? The second level key refining cultivator with the lowest cultivation among the crowd asked cautiously. Dead. Chen Zion nodded, then looked at Chen Daoxuan, who was pale beside him, with a complicated look on his face. Great. Finally dead. Dead. Finally dead. Haha, we succeeded. In midair, except for the cultivator, whose cargo ship was destroyed, who had a drooping face, everyone else celebrated and was overjoyed. After all, getting rid of the blood-spotted sea snake not only means that their own cargo ship can be preserved, but also has an unexpected harvest. As a late-stage first-order demon beast, this blood-spotted sea snake is full of treasures. In addition to the most precious inner elixir and poison sac, the snake meat can be eaten, the snake fangs can be used to make special magic tools, and the snake skin can be sewn into close-fitting defensive soft armor. Just now, everyone concentrated their firepower, but could not cause much damage to the demon snake. This snake skin accounted for at least 80% of the credit. Although the snake skin has been damaged a lot after being destroyed by everyone, it is still no problem to sew it into several sets of close-fitting soft armor. After the black-robed old man moved the body of the demon snake to his ship, he invited everyone to board his cargo ship. When everyone heard his invitation, they all cheered up. Everyone knew that it was time to divide the spoils. The cargo ship of the black-robed old man was 3 times larger than the Kanglang of the Chen family, and the array patterns on the hull were also much more than that of the Kanglang. No wonder the black-robed old man was so nervous about his cargo ship. Everyone thought to themselves. Everyone. The old man in black robe didn't know what everyone was thinking. He was usually taciturn, but his face was ruddy at this moment. It was obvious that he was very satisfied with the gains of this battle. According to the rules of the Carnean Sword sect for the division of military merits, the one who directly killed the enemy will have the main credit and can enjoy 60% of the spoils alone. The main assistant can take 30% of the credit. As for the remaining 10%, you 5 will share it equally. Do you have any different opinions? The old man in black robe looked around and finally set his eyes on Chen Daoxuan. It would be better to say that he was asking for Chen Daoxuan's opinion, rather than asking for everyone's opinions. After all, this is a world of immortal cultivation, where the strong are respected. The strength that Chen Daoxuan just burst out was enough to make the old man in black robe look at him. Everyone looked at each other and shook their heads. It's up to the senior. That's how it's divided. Seeing that everyone had no different opinions, the old man in black robe took out 100 spirit stones from his storage bag and gave 20 spirit stones to each of Chen Zion and the other 4. The corpse of this snake demon is barely worth 1000 spirit stones. The 5 of you will take 1/10, which means 20 spirit stones each. Please count them, fellow Taoists. The black-robed old man said with a bow. Among the crowd, except for the cultivator whose cargo ship was destroyed, the other cultivators, especially the cultivator at the 2nd level of key refining, all looked happy. Obviously, 20 spirit stones was a considerable gain for a casual cultivator at the 2nd level of key refining. After everyone put the spirit stones into their storage bags, they said goodbye to the black-robed old man. After bowing to everyone and seeing them off one by one, the black-robed old man looked at Chen Daoxuan and said, "Fellow Taoist, we meet again. It seems that the junior and the senior are still very predestined." Chen Daoxuan smiled and said, pretending that he didn't hear the black-robed old man automatically upgrading his address from young friend to fellow Taoist. The old man in black robe also laughed and said, "To be honest, I have an unwelcome request this time. Please tell me, senior. I want to use spirit stones to offset the inner elixir and poison sac of the demon snake. What do you think?" After thinking for a while, Chen Daoxuan nodded. "Okay, but I don't want spirit stones. I wonder if you still have water spirit beads to sell me today." It seems that he guessed that Chen Daoxuan would ask this. After all, although Chen Daoxuan is strong, his cultivation is only at the 3rd level of key refining. For him, the water spirit beads that can accelerate the improvement of his cultivation are naturally more attractive than other external objects. But for the old man in black robe, the water spirit beads are a bit useless. He is now at the 9th level of key refining. Unless he can break through to the foundation building stage, these treasures that improve his cultivation will have no effect on him. Here are 5 water spirit beads, priced at 500 spirit stones. How about giving the remaining 100 spirit stones to the demon snake meat? The old man in black robe took out 5 marble-sized water spirit beads and said, "Okay." Chen Daoxuan nodded in agreement. After discussing the division of the spoils, the next step was to deal with the snake demon's body. The 3 of them were all monks, and they used their magic tools to deal with the snake demon's body very quickly. In just 1 stick of incense, the snake demon was skinned, and its meat was taken out. The snake meat and 5 water spirit beads belonged to Chen Daoxuan, while the snake skin, snake teeth, poison sac, and inner elixir belonged to the old man in black robe. Chapter 23 Guangan Swordmaster Zhao Mu Bei. On the deck of the cargo ship, after fighting the enemy together and distributing the spoils, the relationship between the 3 people became visibly familiar. Chen Daoxuan smiled and bowed his hands. Junior Chen Daoxuan, a descendant of the Chen family in Changping County, Chuanghu Island. This is my uncle Chen Zian. May I know your name? I'm Wei Sihei, and I'm honored to meet you 2 Taoist friends. The black-robed old man Wei Sihei formally saluted the 2. Chen Zian and Chen Daoxuan hurriedly returned the salute. Dao Wei is polite. Chen Zian looked flattered. He knew in his heart that, if it weren't for Chen Daoxuan's face, the other party would probably not take him, a cultivator of the 6th level of key refining, seriously. After some polite exchanges, the relationship between the 2 sides became more harmonious. Seeing this, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but ask about the rental and sale of shops in the Sangxiu market. Compared with the Chen uncle and nephew, Wei Sihei, who has been hanging around in the Sangxiu market for many years, obviously knows more about the specific situation of the Sangxiu market than them. Sure enough, after listening to Chen Daoxuan's narration, Wei Sihei frowned, shook his head and said, "I advise you not to open a shop in the Sangxiu market." "Why?" Chen Zian frowned. Wei Sihei looked at Chen Daoxuan, then at Chen Zian, and explained, "To be honest with you 2 Daoists, the cultivation island, where I live also has some spiritual mineral resources, but I have not opened a shop in the Sangxiu market until now. Do you know the reason?" Chen Daoxuan and Chen Zian looked at each other, bowed and said, "Please give me some advice, senior." I can't say I can give you any advice. The black-robed old man Wei Sihei waved his hand. The Senexaiyu market in Guanghan Prefecture is different from the core commercial area. Most of the customers here are Senexaiyu and children of small families, and their purchasing power is weak. If you open a shop, the cost of goods will rise sharply. In this case, why don't Senexaiyu choose to buy at the stalls? As an old bird who has been in the Senexaiyu market for many years, Wei Sihei's words can be said to be extremely sincere. If he hadn't seen Chen Daoxuan's extraordinary potential and wanted to make friends with him, he would never have dissuaded him like this. Hearing these words, combined with Chen Daoxuan's own market research on the Senexaiyu Fang City, he knew that Wei Sihei was not talking nonsense. It's just that Chen Sihei didn't know that he was a weapon refiner, let alone that he mastered a cross-era magic weapon like the Rangling Furnace. After a moment of contemplation, Chen Daoxuan decided to tell part of the truth. To be honest, I happen to be a weapon refiner, so I want to open a magic weapon shop in the Senexaiyu Fang City. Dao I are a weapon refiner? The black-robed old man was stunned at first, and then his face was suspicious. Seeing Wei Sihei's doubtful face, Chen Daoxuan did not explain, but demonstrated a fire control technique in front of him. Fire control is one of the only 2 magic spells that Chen Daoxuan mastered before coming to Guanghan Prefecture, and he had already practiced it to the great success level. In the palm of Chen Daoxuan's hand, a flame changed into various forms, from common cats and dogs to various birds and beasts. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's skillful fire control, Wei Sihei immediately believed it. Because except for weapon refiners and alchemists, no one can master fire control so skillfully. After all, practicing fire control is of no use to increase strength, but will consume a lot of energy. Except for weapon refiners and alchemists, no cultivator would practice this magic. Dao I was actually a weapon refiner. I'm so sorry. If Wei Sihei just wanted to make friends with Chen Daoxuan, then his attitude towards him now has a hint of flattery. After all, weapon refiners and alchemists are too rare in the group of casual cultivators. Such special talents are generally only capable of being cultivated by large families and sects. In addition, the major forces usually protect them very strictly, and ordinary casual cultivators can't come into contact with such people at all. However, Wei Sihei's personality has always been relatively introverted. He clearly wanted to say something flattering, but in the end, he only said a dry "excuse me." Chen Daoxuan didn't care about this. He revealed his secret of being a weapon refiner just to let Wei Sihei, an old bird in the market, introduce him to a reliable store. Sure enough, after learning about Chen Daoxuan's identity as a weapon refiner, Wei Sihei introduced the store information he had in detail. Finally, he patted his chest and promised, "Don't worry, fellow Taoists, I will introduce the store owner to you when I return to the market later. This matter is up to me. In that case, thank you very much, senior." Fellow Taoist, you are too polite. Just as the few people were talking, the battlefield on the front line in the distance seemed to have new changes. Front battlefield. After the Zhao family defeated the monster beast tide, the mermaids who were unwilling to fail personally went down and launched an attack on the Zhao family. Thanks to the amazing eyesight of the cultivators, and Chen Daoxuan and others were looking down from a high position. Even though they were hundreds of miles away, they could clearly see the appearance of the mermaids. As recorded in ancient books, the appearance of mermaids is almost the same as that of humans, and the male mermaids are particularly strong, with exposed muscles that emit a bronze luster under the sun. Female mermaids are extremely beautiful and look lovable. They are all delicate beauties. Of course, the premise is not to look at their lower body. Mermaids, regardless of gender, have lost all human characteristics from the waist down, and instead have fishtails about 10 feet long. Seeing this scene, Wei Sihei couldn't help but sigh. It is said that the mermaids have the blood of human ancestors. I didn't believe it before, but now that I see their appearance, it is not completely groundless. Chen Daoxuan didn't care about mermaids or not. He was now focused on opening a shop in the Sanxiu market and letting Chen Ziyan run the shop. Then he went home to build a weapon refining workshop, mass-produce magic tools, and used industrialized productivity to plunder the wealth of the Huangxing Sea. As for the war between the mermaids and the Zhao family, who cares? Not to mention that the Zhao family easily crushed the invading mermaids. Even if the Zhao family couldn't win, there was still the state city above. If the state city was defeated, there was still the Cunning sword sect. In this world, the human race is the absolute overlord. In addition, no matter whether it is a monster or an alien race, it can't compete with the human cultivators. Otherwise, with a common foreign enemy, the Cunning sword sect would not have fought with the Chuan kingdom for 400 years. During the conversation, among the mermaids, a middle-aged mermaid with an extremely strong body and a resolute face stepped on the waves and walked out of the tribe. Opposite, a young man in a white robe, with a jade-like face and a handsome face stood in front of him. The man in white stood tall, carrying a 3-foot-long sword on his back, standing in the air. Even though they were hundreds of miles apart, Chen Daoxuan could still sense the other person's aura of transcendence, as if a banished immortal had descended upon the earth. Who is that? Upon hearing this, Wei Sihei's face was filled with complexities. Guanghan Sword Immortal Zhao Mubei. Chapter 24, Purple Mansion Prodigy Ranking. He is Zhao Mubei? Chen Daoxuan was familiar with the name Zhao Mubei. Not only him, but Zhao Mubei was also well known in the hearts of the younger generation of cultivators in the entire Guanghan prefecture and even the entire Wangxinghe. He established his foundation at the age of 21, and then broke through to the Purple Mansion stage in less than 50 years, becoming a Purple Mansion cultivator who was less than 100 years old. You know, the lifespan of a Purple Mansion cultivator is 500 years. This means that Zhao Mubei has more than 400 years to break through the golden core stage. If nothing unexpected happens, Zhao Mubei has a great chance of breaking through the golden core stage, and is also known as the cultivator with the most hope of becoming a golden core true person in Guanghan prefecture in the past 500 years. Not only that, Zhao Mubei's real strength lies in the fact that he is a cultivator on the Purple Mansion Xianjiao list of Wangxinghe. The Purple Mansion Xianjiao list is one of the lists established by the Cunning sword sect to fight against the Chuan kingdom. There are 3 complete lists, namely the Foundation Establishment Potential Dragon list, the Purple Mansion Xianjiao list, and the Golden Core True Person list. In Chen Daoxuan's view, all that Cunning sword sect did was just to seize the desire of the cultivators to become famous. In Wangxinghe, the largest group of cultivators are independent cultivators, followed by the children of the major immortal cultivation families. Although Cunning sword sect is the ruler of Wangxinghe, it is impossible for all cultivators to fight to the death on the battlefield with just one order. Therefore, Cunning sword sect came up with a way to attract cultivators to the battlefield with fame and profit. The Chen family of Shuanghu Island relied on their military exploits to exchange for the refining inheritance, the method of building the earth fire room, and even the chasing wind sword art and covering rain sword art from Cunning sword sect. These are all benefits. And the Purple Mansion Xianjiao list, a list that is famous all over the world, is fame. What is the purpose of cultivators practicing? The first one is of course to become immortals. However, this world has not produced a Mahayan, a true immortal cultivator who ascended to the upper realm for hundreds of thousands of years. For most cultivators, the idea of becoming an immortal is just an illusory dream. In addition to becoming an immortal, the second biggest goal pursued by cultivators is naturally longevity. And if you want longevity, you can't escape the pursuit of skills and various cultivation resources. Unfortunately, most of these things are occupied by the immortal families and Cunning sword sect in Wangxinghe. If ordinary cultivators want to obtain a large number of cultivation resources, in addition to snatching food from the immortal families and Cunning sword sect, the only way left is to go to the battlefield to gain military merit. When the cultivators achieve the goal of longevity, they can't live in vain and practice all day long for cultivation, right? The cultivators will naturally begin to pursue other things. For example, beauty, material enjoyment, and what cultivators value most, reputation. In the world of immortal cultivation, the higher the level of the cultivators, the more they tend to value things like reputation. The 3 lists launched by Cunning sword sect just meet the cultivators' desire for fame. Using the 2 weapons of fame and profit, Cunning sword sect tied all the cultivators in Wangxinghe to its chariot. For 400 years, Carnean sword sect drove this chariot and rushed through Xian Tao, turning Chuan Kingdom upside down. Even from the perspective of a modern man like Chen Daoxuan, the helmsman of Carnean sword sect is also a remarkable figure. When he saw Zhao Mubei standing in the air in white clothes at the front line, Chen Daoxuan's mentality was relatively balanced. After all, he was much younger than Zhao Mubei. In terms of potential, Chen Daoxuan claimed that he would never be inferior to the other party. However, when Isahei and Chen Zion on the side were full of loneliness in their eyes. After all, in terms of age, both of them were nearly 100 years old. In terms of cultivation, the white figure on the horizon was completely different from them. As cultivators of the same era, it was impossible to say that they had no feelings in their hearts. It was just because the gap between the two sides was so big that neither of them dared to be jealous. This kind of taste, only they themselves could experience. Just when everyone had different thoughts, the battle on the front line had already begun. However, because the distance between the two sides was too far, Chen Daoxuan and others could not detect such a long distance with their spiritual sense, and they could not keep up with the speed of the two sides fighting with their eyesight. They could only see the flashing sword light and the continuous roar in the sky. They did not expect that they were not even qualified to watch the battle at this level. Feeling the impact of the aftermath of the battle, Chen Daoxuan sighed. Fortunately, they were far enough away. Chen Daoxuan even saw that the row of ships in the front was completely destroyed by the aftermath of the battle between Zhao Mubei and the high-level mermaid. The monks watching the battle also had a look of seeing a ghost and fled in panic. With Zhao Mubei and the high-level mermaid as the center, no one dared to approach within a radius of 10 miles. Finally, accompanied by a sword light about 100 feet long, the high-level mermaid fled with injuries, and the entire mermaid tribe also fled in all directions. Another purple mansion monk of the Zhao family was about to chase, but was stopped by the pale Zhao Mubei. Third uncle, there's no need to chase. Mubei, are you okay? Seeing Zhao Mubei's pale face, the cultivator he called third uncle immediately became nervous. Zhao Mubei was the most talented cultivator of the younger generation of his Zhao family. Not only did he break through the purple mansion period at a young age, he was also a sword genius who had comprehended the sword intent when he was still in the foundation building stage. This was also the biggest reason why Zhao Mubei was listed on the Purple Mansion Xianjiao list. He was a sword cultivator that was even rarer than a cultivator with a heavenly spiritual root. And now, Zhao Mubei seemed to be injured. How could the old man not be shocked and angry? Thinking of this, the old man whom Zhao Mubei called the third great uncle could not help but blame Mubei. What's the point of one-on-one rules against this kind of alien race? Just now, you and I joined forces to take him down. Why did you get injured? After blaming, the old man showed a distressed expression again. Are you seriously injured? Third great uncle, don't worry, it's just a minor injury. Zhao Mubei shook his head. My Zhao family captures mermaids every year. The mermaids and my Zhao family have always resented each other. If we don't follow the rules and kill that high-level mermaid this time, I'm sure the mermaids and my Zhao family will have no room for maneuver. No room for maneuver. So what? Is my Zhao family afraid of a mere mermaid? The third great uncle was very disdainful. Seeing the attitude of the third great uncle, Zhao Mubei hesitated to speak and finally shook his head and stopped talking. Not only the third great uncle, but all the cultivators of the Zhao family felt that the Zhao family was invincible in the 100,000-mile sea area, and no one was taken seriously. Zhao Mubei knew that this mentality of the clansman was not a good thing for the Zhao family. In recent years, the several major foundation building families headed by the Yang family have become increasingly estranged from the Zhao family. As far as he knew, the Yang family had been secretly uniting with other foundation building families to build another immortal city to compete with the Guanghan Prefecture Immortal City, which was in its heyday. However, due to the distribution of interests and fear of the Zhao family's power, the alliance talks had not been smooth. Chapter 25 Family Power. 3 days later, in a restaurant in Senexai Fang City, Dao Wei, thank you for your help in purchasing the shop this time. My Chen family is grateful. Thank you for your help, senior. Chen Zion and Chen Daoxuan raised their glasses and toasted Wei Sihei with a glass of wine, saying with a smile, "No, no, we are all friends. It's a small matter, a small matter." Wei Sihei quickly picked up the glass and said with a smile, "In 3 days, the small matter of the mermaids attacking Guang'an Prefecture had long been settled." In Sanxiu Fang City, the topic of discussion gradually shifted from this war to the discussion of Guang'an sword immortals Almu Bei. As they toasted and exchanged cups, the atmosphere at the wine table gradually became heated. Chen Zian, who was slightly drunk, couldn't help but sighed. Guang'an Prefecture Immortal City is really worth every inch of land. I didn't expect the price of the shops in Sanxiu Fang City to be so high. Yes. Wei Sihei heard this and agreed deeply. He had spent the longest time in the Sanxiu market in Guang'an Prefecture, and he had the deepest feelings about it. In fact, the shops in the Sanxiu market are not bad. A medium-sized shop can be purchased for at most 1,000 spirit stones. The most exaggerated ones are the shops in the core business district. Talking about the exaggerated prices of shops in the core business district, Wei Sihei shook his head. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan asked calmly, "Are the shops in the core business district very expensive?" "Expensive?" Wei Sihei smiled. "The shops there are no longer just expensive. Although the prices on the market are only 10 times more expensive than those in the Sanxiu market. But the fact is that the shops there cannot be bought, even if you have money. They are all controlled by the Zhao family, Yang family, Wu family and other immortal cultivation families. It is as difficult as ascending to heaven for ordinary cultivators and small families to intervene." Maybe he drank a little too much. Wei Sihei began to talk more and more. In addition, he was dissatisfied with the immortal cultivation families in his heart, and at this moment he actually went to Chen Daoxuan and the others to confide in them. For example, the restaurant under our feet is the property of the Wu family, a great family of immortal cultivators. In the Sanxiu market, more than 90% of the restaurants, inns, pawn shops, and shops are controlled by the great families of immortal cultivators. In the core business district, this proportion has reached an exaggerated 100%. We, the children of the Sanxiu and the children of the small families, are obviously the most numerous, but we get the least. How unfair. At the end of his speech, Wei Sihei slammed the wine glass heavily on the wine table. Hearing this, everyone was silent for a while. After a long while, Chen Zion said faintly, "Brother Wei, you are drunk." Hearing this, Wei Sihei immediately broke out in a cold sweat and sobered up. It is not a wise thing to loudly criticize the great families of immortal cultivators here. Although almost all the Sanxiu are dissatisfied with the great families of immortal cultivators, no one dares to complain openly. Because the Sanxiu who have such courage have all disappeared silently. Seeing this scene, Chen Daoxuan hurriedly brought up other topics to avoid the embarrassment of being cold. Half an hour later, the banquet was over, and it was already late. Chen Daoxuan and his 13th uncle Chen Zion walked back to the inn side by side, without saying a word. Back to the inn. Just when Chen Daoxuan was about to practice, Chen Zion knocked on the door. 13th uncle, is there anything you need so late? Yes, go in and talk. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan hurriedly made a gesture of invitation. The two entered the room. Chen Daoxuan thought about it and carefully set up a soundproof formation. "Daoxuan, since the store has been prepared, I will be in charge of the store next, and the family affairs will be left to you." At this point, Chen Zion's eyes were complicated. Chen Daoxuan's growth rate far exceeded his imagination, not only in his personal strength, but also in his refining level. In the past few days, Chen Zion had already figured it out. Chen Daoxuan was not what he said as a first level lower grade refiner, but a senior first level upper grade refiner. Although he didn't know why his nephew wanted to hide his incompetence in front of him, from another perspective, Chen Daoxuan, who was only 16 years old, understood the principle of a tree standing out in the forest. This proved that he was much more mature than he thought. Thinking of this, Chen Zion felt a little relieved about handing over the power of the family to Chen Daoxuan. After saying this, Chen Zion took out a seal from his storage bag. The seal was black in color, with a strong spiritual charm on it. It was actually a first-class magic weapon. This is the seal of the patriarch of my Chen family. Now, I'm handing it over to you. Chen Daoxuan handed over the black seal and said solemnly, "Yes." Chen Daoxuan took the seal and nodded seriously. After explaining the matter, Chen Daoxuan then asked, "By the way, how are you doing with the procurement of supplies? Everything has been prepared. We'll just have to wait for the ship to be loaded tomorrow and we'll be able to return to Xuanhu Island." Chen Daoxuan paused. "This time we took out a total of 8743 spirit stones from the clan treasury. Among them, I spent 100 spirit stones on the personal purchase of water spirit beads, 500 spirit stones on the purchase of a copy of the inheritance for refining the wind and thunder array magic weapon, 1000 spirit stones on the purchase of shops, and a total of 6721 spirit stones on the purchase of various supplies. I still have 422 spirit stones left in my hands." At this point, Chen Daoxuan smiled bitterly and said, "This is all our family's belongings." Hearing that the family's 300 years of savings had been spent on this trip, even though Chen Daoxuan was mentally prepared, he still felt heartbroken. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's grim expression, Chen Daoxuan hurriedly comforted him. "Uncle 13, these are all necessary expenses for the development of the family. Besides, we will definitely be able to earn back 10 or 100 times in the future." Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan sighed. "I hope so." As if thinking of something, Chen Daoxuan took out a jade bottle from his storage bag. "By the way, this is a little gift I bought for you in the core business district a few days ago. Please accept it." Chen Daoxuan curiously took the jade bottle and opened it. A strong medicinal fragrance emanated from the jade bottle. Seeing this, Chen Daoxuan quickly sealed the bottle mouth. Key gathering pill. It turned out to be a first level middle grade elixir that assists the cultivators in the key refining stage to practice key gathering pill. According to Chen Daoxuan's understanding, a key gathering pill costs as much as 50 lingxi, which is almost equivalent to a first level low grade magic weapon. Such an expensive key gathering pill. There are actually 10 in the bottle. Daoxuan, the family was able to buy Tang Meidan for you, but I didn't buy it for you. Have you ever resented me in your heart? Why do you say that, Uncle 13? Daoxuan has never thought so. Tang Maiden costs as much as 500 spirit stones. If it were me, I would not buy such an expensive spirit pill for my descendants, when the family was unable to make ends meet. Chen Daoxuan shook his head. "But you know what? When I saw you use the chasing wind sword out at the great success level a few days ago, I regretted it. 500 spirit stones are a lot, but I delayed the cultivation time of a genius cultivator in the family for 5 years. Chen Daoxuan didn't know how to respond to this. "Daoxuan, I can see that you will go further in the future than me and any ancestor of the Chen family, but Uncle 13 wants to ask you for one thing." At this point, Chen Daoxuan looked at Chen Daoxuan with red eyes. "Uncle 13's order. No matter what the future holds, don't abandon your family, okay? Because this is your root." Hearing this plea, an indescribable emotion overwhelmed Chen Daoxuan. He felt sour in his heart and eyes. Chen Daoxuan's eyes were red, and he nodded heavily. No matter what the future holds, Daoxuan will never abandon his family. Very good, Chen Daoxuan showed a relieved smile on his face. Fin est capitulo muchas gracias por legahaster el final no se olviden de del lake buscas más contenido exclusivo y acceso inmediato, suscria bet en nuestro Patreon. Recuda, cada like, suscripción o donación nos americana. Gracias a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.